39 miles of new border wall projects already underway in various stages of construction and planning. The first flights arrived to Guantanamo Bay yesterday afternoon out of El Paso.
Wow.
And who were some of the passengers aboard, you may ask?
Okay.
There were 10 members of the transnational gang Tren de Aragua on this flight.
Ooh.
And overall, our heroic ICE agents continue to prioritize the removal of violent, criminal, illegal aliens in communities across the country.
Gotta catch them all.
On February 3rd,
That's right.
ICE Dallas arrested a citizen of Nicaragua who has been convicted of sexual assault, strong arm, and lewd acts with a minor and sentenced to 15 years in prison.
Wow.
ICE Los Angeles arrested a Mexican citizen who has been convicted of lewd acts with a minor and sentenced to 364 days. And ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of Mexico who has been convicted of homicide by vehicle and hit and run and sentenced to 6 months confinement. And ICE New York arrested a Venezuelan national and known TDA gang member who has a prior criminal conviction for assault in the third degree, causing physical injury. Americans are safer every single time one of these criminals is arrested and deported from our country. On another important and ongoing topic, the Senate is working fast to confirm President Trump's exceptional cabinet nominees in the face of relentless media smear campaigns. As of right now, 12 members of the president's cabinet have been confirmed, most recently Pam Bondi, who, as you all know, I was just in the Oval Office for that swearing-in ceremony surrounded by Pam's lovely
Harris
family.
would have been better.
And we look forward to watching her serve as the Attorney General of the United States.
Maybe you're right.
According to CNN, President Trump is getting more cabinet picks confirmed so far than the average president in the modern era. Another success story.
Yep.
And we believe it's critical that Republicans in the Senate majority stay tough and keep their foot on the gas to confirm all of the remaining nominees as quickly as possible.
America's
so we can
becoming Nazi
President
America.
Trump's important work here at the White House and across our entire federal government.
Deporting illegal immigrants
and
is
lastly,
Nazis.
throughout his historic campaign, President Trump pledged to restore common sense to our country.
So true.
And he is continuing to deliver on that with an executive order that he will sign later today. The president will be signing an executive order keeping men out of women's sports to defend the safety of athletes, protect competitive integrity,
I'm surprised
and
he didn't do that
uphold
already.
the promise of Title IX. This common sense action from President Trump ends the disgusting betrayal of women and girls by the previous administration, who for years catered to radical activists who wanted biological males to be treated as women in workplace showers, competitive sports, prisons, and even rape shelters.
Common sense is
ideology,
back,
insanity is over. Submissions from individuals across the country interested in participating in our new media seat at a future briefing continue to flood in. We are at more than 12,000 and counting. If you're watching right now and are interested, you can continue to apply on our new media website, whitehouse.gov/newmedia. And in the seat today, we have a longtime national television broadcaster. I'm sure many of you recognized her when she came in, Sage Steele, who is now the host of an incredibly successful podcast, The Sage Steele Show, on YouTube and all podcast platforms. And previously, Sage was a fixture at ESPN from 2007 to 2023, primarily hosting SportsCenter, which we all know well, before leaving the company to exercise her First Amendment rights more freely. We are honored to welcome her to the briefing room today. She will be joining the president at the big EO signing later this afternoon. I know many of you will be there as well. So Sage,
when am I going to go to the White House?
Very exciting day for women and girls across the country.
Can I get a computer there?
This is exciting, and Caroline, thank you for welcoming people.
I don't know how much space they have.
Perspective, different background in this seat. It really does mean a lot. Thank you. Obviously, the House already passed the Protection of Women
like a laptop?
Sports Act, which was a really big step for women and girls. So far, the Senate, as we know, has not brought it up.
Come on.
We all know executive orders can be overturned. So I'm wondering how important it is to the president to get Congress to bring this, to pass legislation. So there are no instances like the past administration.
You're gonna buy a house in Gaza?
Destroy Title IX.
I don't.
It's incredibly important
that.
Congress immediately acts on this priority. I think the president is really setting the tone, making this a very immediate priority for this
Show Trump
administration,
Concord.
just as he promised to do. on the campaign trail. And I'd like to get into the executive order a little bit because it is the news of the day here at the White House, and talk about what this executive action will actually do. So the executive order that the president will be signing later this afternoon, as I said, upholds the promise of Title IX. It also will require the DOJ to abide by the nationwide previous administration's illegal Title IX rewrite that would have dissolved single-sex spaces and opportunities.
Oh, jeez.
It also requires immediate action, including enforcement actions against schools and athletic associations comprised of schools that deny women single-sex sports in single-sex locker rooms. The executive order also calls for the convening of private sporting bodies in the White House. We want them to come to this campus so the president can hear in person the stories of female athletes who have suffered lifelong injuries, who have been silenced and forced to shower with men and compete with men on athletic fields across the country. Many of those women will be at the White House today. I encourage all of you in the media to actually talk to them, to hear their stories. And I would also just add one more thing. This is a wildly popular position with the American people. In fact, there was a new poll recently that showed the overwhelming majority of Democrats also support keeping biological men out of women's sports. And so I know the president is very excited about the bill signing that will take place at 3 o'clock.
Don't believe retard Twitter radicals. They're not real.
Look forward to seeing you there, Sage. So thank you very, very much. Garrett, great to see you here today.
Thank you.
Don't
on
believe
Gaza, the president has spent basically his entire public career criticizing foreign entanglements, nation building,
this is
sending
a good
American
question.
troops to fight abroad,
yeah, true.
particularly in the Middle East.
True.
This plan seems like it could ultimately involve all of those things.
Yeah.
Can you explain this reversal and how building
Why?
and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad.
I think it does. I think everybody knows it does.
On the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region. And as I said in my opening remarks, we've had the same people pushing the same solutions to this problem for decades. And it's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. That does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
American troops in Gaza last night. Are you doing that now?
I am saying that the president has not committed to that just yet. He has not made that commitment, and you know that.
And on the foreign partners, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Saudis have already panned this plan. What foreign partners, if any, have expressed any interest in being part of it?
Well, the president has said he's been socialing this idea for quite some time. He's been thinking about this. He said in his remarks last night, this was not a decision or an announcement that he takes lightly. And the president has already spoken to the President al-Sisi. In fact, that was his first foreign leader call. He's meeting with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, next week. He spoke with the King of Bahrain. He spoke with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And he has made it very clear. He's been very vocal that he expects our partners in the region, particularly Egypt and Jordan, to accept Palestinian refugees temporarily so that we can rebuild their home. I'd like to show you some images of Gaza that were taken. Fox News aired this. I mean, that is, as they put it,
wow, look at that.
Apocalyptic scene in Gaza. This is an uninhabitable place for human beings. Do you really think that families can live their dream in a region that looks like this, with no running water, no electricity?
Looks pretty bad.
And the special envoy to the president, Steve Witkoff, recently traveled to Gaza, as you all know. And he came back with images that he showed the president of the dire situation.
Y'all haven't been getting notification for me?
And the president made this decision
How many of y'all got
with
notification?
a humanitarian heart for all people in the region. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. Are any officials here preparing to fight Democratic lawmakers in the streets?
Absolutely not.
So,
And thanks for the question.
some
Fight 'em in
elected
the
Democrats
streets?
are so steamed about Doge. Congresswoman LaMonica McIver says we are at war. Ilhan Omar says we might actually see somebody get killed. And Chris Van Hollen says we have to fight this in the Congress, we have to fight this in the streets. So what now?
And may I just point out, if you heard that type
Sounds like
of
someone needs a
violence
wellness check.
enticing rhetoric from our side of the aisle, from Republican leaders on Capitol Hill, I think there would be a lot more outrage in this room today. It's unacceptable, the comments that have been made by these Democrat leaders, and frankly,
Inciting violence,
they don't
of
even
course.
know what they're talking about. Because President Trump was elected with a mandate from the American people to make this government more efficient. He campaigned across this country with Elon Musk,
She's right.
vowing that
People
Elon
voted
was
for
going to
Elon
head up
doing
the
this.
Department of Government Efficiency, and the two of them, with a great team around them, were going to look at the receipts of this federal government and ensure it's accountable to American taxpayers. That's all that is happening here. And for Democrat officials to incite
No, they didn't.
violence and encourage Americans to
How many of
take
y'all
to the
who voted for
streets
Trump
is incredibly
voted
alarming,
for
and they
Elon
should
to
be
do
held
this?
accountable for that rhetoric.
It
How many of
sounds
you
like
guys-
something that they're most concerned about is Doge engineers with access to Treasury systems. Can you clarify?
About that?
Do the Doge engineers have read-only access in
Yes.
these systems? So they are not allowed to write new code? They are not, okay.
No.
And then one more thing. NBC is reporting that some of the illegal immigrants that we've seen rounded
Yeah.
up and arrested are not being deported. They're being released with ankle or wrist monitoring devices, or they have to check in on the phone. So is the administration arresting more people than you have room for?
I have seen the reports, and I'm glad you brought it up because we want to address it. There have been a total of 461 illegal aliens. This is of this morning when I got this information from DHS that have been released from custody. Of the more than 8,000 that have been arrested since President Trump was inaugurated, it's less than 6%. And there are reasons for their release. Some of the factors include a lack of significant likelihood of removal in the foreseeable future, lack of detention availability, which is something this president and this administration has been incredibly vocal about. We are doing everything we can to deport and detain illegal immigrants, but we need Congress's help to increase funding for Border Patrol and for ICE to increase detention capability in our facilities. And then other serious medical conditions have also been the reasons for some of the release of these individuals. But none of
Medical
them have
conditions
final
make
deportation
sense.
orders. Many of them are probably contesting their immigration status.
Yeah.
I'd refer you to DHS for more details, but I did get that information because I knew it'd be a question, so thank you. Sure.
Yeah, sure. Of course,
Yes.
that makes sense.
The president and you here again today
Send
have
them
made
to El
clear, given
Salvador?
the devastation, you think Palestinians have no choice but to leave Gaza and go elsewhere. But Palestinians say this is their home. They don't want to go.
Fucking Paul.
The president last night said he's willing to use the military if necessary. Is the U.S. prepared to remove Palestinians from Gaza by force?
The president
8K
is prepared
in 2 weeks
to
is
rebuild
low?
Gaza
Yeah, I think
for
it is too.
Palestinians and all people in the region, peace-loving people who want real economic development and opportunity in the region. This is a region that has been controlled by Iranian-backed terrorists, Hamas, who have brutalized not just Israelis but Palestinians too. It is because of Hamas that you see those images on that screen, that Gaza has become a demolition site because Hamas launched that brutal attack on Israel on October the 7th. And so again, I would stress, President Trump wants to ensure that this can be a place where all people can live in peace. He is a peacemaker in chief. He made that very clear in his first term. And as for how that will be accomplished, the
Hamas was
president
propped
and
up by
his team
Israel?
are talking with
I
our
thought they
allies
got
in the
voted
region
for, like, a long
to
time
consider
ago.
next steps.
But should the American people be prepared to see U.S. military on the ground fighting a ground war against Hamas?
Again,
I
the
don't
president
know.
has not committed to U.S. troops in the region.
But it is an option.
I have said that the president has not committed to that yet. Sure.
If I could just follow up on that, though, why not rule out the idea of committing U.S. troops? This has been a long-standing argument that the president has made really over the last decade or so, talking about endless wars and not something the U.S. wants. Why not rule out
Because
troops?
I think the president is very good when he's making deals and negotiating, not to rule out anything because he wants to preserve that leverage in negotiations. And so I think that's what he's doing
Obviously,
here.
that's what
Mary.
he's
Follow up
doing.
on that, though, he also said that everyone loves this plan. He said that in the Oval Office.
Oh,
this morning.
everybody
In
loves
fact,
it.
The
Really?
Deputy Prime Minister of
He
Jordan
said that?
called it the declaration of war on the Arab people. So how does he square the fact that even some Republicans on the Hill are objecting to this or questioning this? How does he square the fact saying everyone loves this
Well,
plan?
King Abdullah of Jordan will be here next week, so I can provide you more context on the conversations he will have directly with the President of the United States after that meeting. And I would just point out that there's been a lot of leaders and officials all around the world who have doubted, I suppose, the deal-making ability of President Trump. You heard the Panama leader saying that he would not agree to some of the concessions that he has now made because of Secretary Rubio's visit.
No.
You had the Colombian president saying he wouldn't accept flights of Colombian illegal nationals who have entered into our country illegally, and those flights are underway. So actions speak louder than words. Dasha.
You said the president has been working on this idea for a while behind the scenes now. Is there a written plan based on the president's proposal for Gaza? And if so, when was it drafted and who had a hand in that?
The plan was written in the president's remarks last night
just
as
made
he
it up.
revealed it to the world and to the American
So
people.
he just-
And his team are continuing to be engaged on this effort. I saw the National Security Advisor this morning. He has a very busy day of calls. And they will again continue to engage with our partners. That includes Steve Witkoff as well. Mary.
Two questions.
Surprise,
for you
bitch!
So, how is today's executive order going to impact the 2028
free
Summer
balling?
Olympics in Los Angeles? For example, would a man who thinks that he's a transgender woman be allowed to compete as a female on U.S.
Oh
soil?
man.
It's
Well,
a
obviously
very
no,
good
right?
question, and the president has actually mentioned this, that he does expect the Olympic Committee and the NCAA to no longer allow men to compete in women's sports. And I think the president, with the signing of his pen, starts a very public pressure campaign on these organizations to do the right thing
Yeah, he does.
for women and for girls across the country. Again, this is an incredibly
That's a
popular
fact.
position. There have been many notable female athletes who have had the courage to speak out against some very powerful institutions in this country. They deserve to have a voice and a say. The president is bringing their voice to the highest level at the White House this afternoon, and he expects these organizations to comply with this federal executive order that he'll be signing today.
Thank you. And one more. On media coverage of this executive order and the topic in general, what's the White House's view of framing that calls men transgender females or similar rhetoric coming from organizations like the ACLU and GLAAD?
What?
Well, it's been very clear. The policy of this administration is that there are only two sexes, male and female. Pretty simple. Brian Glenn.
Yes. USAID has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Bizarre things that we've been, taxpayers have been.
That's about
funding.
it.
Now it looks like there are a couple of media outlets that have been dragged into this conversation as far as USAID funding as well. Does the president have any comment on that?
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening.
Wait.
The Doge team is working on canceling those.
That's real?
Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that
Oh
we
my
are going
God.
line by line when it comes to the federal government's
Bro.
books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people?
These roaches are
Is
getting
this a good
snipped,
use
man.
of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not,
This is
that
bad.
funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that.
Oh
effort.
God.
Thank you. I'd like to give some love to the back row. I've heard that unfortunately they haven't been called on in years past. So, Reagan, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Caroline.
The New York
WHA
Times, too.
announced that comedian Amber Ruffin, who has called the president a toddler with his pants pulled down,
Who cares?
will be the entertainment for this year's Correspondents' Dinner. Does the White House have a reaction to this choice, and will the president be attending the dinner
It's
this
a
year?
joke.
Certainly an interesting choice. I have the president's invitation
Gives a
on
fuck.
my desk. I have the invitation from myself on my desk as well. Haven't talked to the president about it. When he makes his decision, I will let you all know. But definitely an interesting choice of the comedian. I'll talk to the boss about it and see what we decide. Sure, go ahead.
Caroline, in the back,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Appreciate it. On the executive order set to be signed today, you said that this will be enforced. Can you spell out for schools and the public how exactly the administration plans to enforce this, even at the local level?
Nope.
And on top of that, there are human rights groups who say that this could expose kids to discrimination. What is your response to that?
I think kids have already been exposed to discrimination, especially young women and girls who have been forced to shower in locker rooms with biological men, who have been forced to compete on playing fields with biological men, which is incredibly unfair and unsafe, and again, an incredibly unpopular policy with the American people. As for the actions that this executive order takes, I already laid those out at the beginning of the briefing. I'm happy to give you a copy of this fact sheet so you can let your audiences across the country know.
Message to schools who don't comply with this.
They should, because it's going to be federal law in about an hour and a half. So your colleagues, you're right, to my
Thanks,
left.
Caroline.
Yes.
Taylor with Spectrum News. You talked a bit about Doge. Elon Musk is currently a, quote, special government employee who also owns companies that have billions of dollars in federal contracts. You said earlier this week that he has abided by all applicable federal laws, but what steps is the Trump administration taking to address that conflict of interest?
He already talked about that.
The president was already asked and answered this question this week, and he said if Elon Musk comes across a conflict of interest with the contracts,
how do I know this? It's not even my job.
Then Elon will excuse himself from those contracts. And he has, again, abided by all applicable laws. In the back left, go ahead.
Trade advisor Peter Navarro, when asked about the External Revenue Service today, said, quote, we're going to collect a lot of tariff revenues and we're going to get tax cuts out of it. Is it the official position of the White House that tariffs will lower taxes for Americans?
The president has always been clear that he believes tariffs are a tax on foreign nations, and he's committed to cutting taxes for the American people here at home. He also believes tariffs are a great revenue raiser for this country, and that's exactly why he has committed to the creation of the External Revenue Service, which I think is a phenomenal idea.
We have to take other people's money and then make it our money.
BBC, can you confirm that under the president's plans for Gaza, any and all Palestinians who want to stay in Gaza on their land will be allowed to do so?
I can confirm that the president is committed to rebuilding Gaza and to temporarily relocating those who are there, because as I've showed you repeatedly, it is a demolition site. There is no running water. There is no electricity. The president wants these individuals to live in peace. He is committed to doing that with this very bold new plan, and we will continue to keep you apprised of updates as we receive them. Ed Lawrence,
that's not an answer.
Yes, go ahead, Ed.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So now that the President Trump's policies are starting to take shape, how long will it take to cycle through and get some of the actual prices that Americans are paying to come down?
Prices at the store.
That's a great question.
Across the board,
That's a good question.
Well, the president is doing everything he can, obviously, to reduce the cost of living crisis in this country as quickly as possible. That is why he signed a litany of executive orders across the board in the first couple of weeks here. He declared a national energy emergency. He committed to cutting 10 regulations for every new one on the book. As you know, working for a Fox Business-related outlet, deregulation and energy independence are huge drivers of reducing inflation in this country. And I think Americans can be assured by the results President Trump had in his first term, when, again, inflation was 1.4% when he left office.
Or is it a year, and will Americans have the patience to wait for it?
I don't have a timeline, but the president is doing everything that he
3 hours, 5 minutes, and 2 seconds.
For Americans at home.
Why is pepper spray banned in Canada?
Is it worth risking the life of a single U.S. Marine?
What else starts with C?
Into the Riviera of the Middle East?
Phil, I'm not sure why you're asking that question, because I've already said the president has not committed to sending Marines or any boots on the ground in Gaza. We'll bring it to the front row.
You're holding out a possibility?
Good to see you again here in the front row, Caroline. Two things. On today's announcement, Title IX, if he scales back the Education Department or moves to shut it down entirely, what entity will enforce Title IX?
As of now, this will be enforced through education, through Title IX. If the abolishment of the Department of Education continues, which, as the president said yesterday, it's something his team is looking at and considering. It's something he talked a lot about on the campaign trail. Then, of course, we will look at additional maneuvers to ensure that these very important policies can be implemented.
So the education abolishment thing still in.
What about RFK?
The president talked about it yesterday in the Oval Office, and he has good reason to talk about it. I mean, look,
what about pure cream, sugar, Coca-Cola?
Failing students in this country. The Nation's report card, I brought it up in my remarks last week. It shows that fourth graders are not reading at the level they should. I believe it was 40% of them are proficient in reading. As the mother of a child, I want an education system that helps my child read and write, teaches him math, nothing else in the classroom. And the president is wholeheartedly committed.
The reason
to,
why schools are bad is they have to be made for retards.
In this country.
We got a bunch of stupid people in school. Should put them in coal mines.
Is he looking at offering anything?
That's the problem.
That take in Palestinians?
Take the bottom 20%, put them in mines.
And secondly, when the president announced
Take the craft out of Minecraft.
taking over Gaza policy yesterday,
Just make it happen.
was Netanyahu aware of this, and what was his reaction when Trump presented that idea to him?
I was not. I won't get ahead of the president's discussions or negotiations on your first question about what would be offered. I think the president's made it clear that he expects the nations in the region to step up and to accept Palestinian refugees who will be temporarily relocated for the rebuilding of Gaza. As for whether Prime Minister Netanyahu was aware before the president's remarks, he was indeed. I wasn't present for that reaction. But again, this is something the president has been socializing and thinking about for quite some time. Nick, good to see you.
Oh, Jordan.
Jordan, sorry.
Thank you, Caroline. So Secretary Hegseth announced yesterday that Army recruiting levels have reached 12-year highs in December, 15-year highs in January. What is making young people want to serve the military under the Trump administration, and how does that contrast to Biden's failure?
Yeah, no shit, obviously.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people signed up to be Border Patrol.
First of all, the recruitment level for all branches of our military are at crisis levels, and it serves as a national security
The Helldivers
risk,
moment, yeah.
that our military branches are not fully staffed to where they need to be. And I do believe it's a culture problem within these institutions.
Biden was a demented retard, and nobody wanted to support that.
Emphasized by the executive orders he has signed to root DEI out of the military. And I think
And Kamala was a cackling retard.
Honorably signing up to serve in our nation's
Wants to
military,
go and die
see
for
someone
that.
like Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, who is a proven warfighter, who risked his life in battle for this country, who understands what it means to deploy and to defend the Constitution and your nation abroad and to put your life on the line. When they see a leader like that, and a leader like President Trump, who is committed to peace through strength, that's very inspiring. And we look forward to seeing those recruitment numbers and retention numbers skyrocketing over the next 4 years. And I know Pete Hegseth is committed to increasing recruitment at all branches of the military. I would defer you to the Department of Defense on exactly what he plans to implement. Jeff.
Thanks very much. Two questions. One, the president yesterday used the word permanent for permanently resettle Palestinians. I hear you saying temporarily today. Is that a shift or a specific?
It's two different phases in what their plan is, obviously.
And my second question is, yesterday he spoke about the U.S. owning Gaza. Who owns Gaza now, and how would the U.S. acquire ownership?
Gaza is currently run by Iranian-backed terrorists in the Middle East, Hamas, who we all agree, I think everybody in the region agrees, that can no longer stand. Just look at the events of October 7th and the events since. And the president, again, is committed to rebuilding the region for all people who want to return to it once it is no longer a demolition site and it's a place where people can actually live and thrive in harmony, as he said last night. His words, not mine. Daniel.
Permanent versus temporarily resettle? Can you just
The
clarify
president has made it clear that they need to be temporarily relocated out of Gaza for the rebuilding
no
of this
shit.
effort. Again, it's a demolition site right now. It's not a livable place for any human being. And I think it's actually quite evil to suggest that people should live in such dire conditions. Daniel.
So much. The Daily Guidance says that the president will be meeting with a pair of governors today, Governor Abbott of Texas and Governor Newsom of California. It comes after the president took executive action to turn the
That's
water
my
back
guy.
on
Yes.
in California. Billions of gallons are flowing now. What can you tell us about the two meetings and the importance of President Trump's actions to help people in California?
Sure. Those meetings will be taking place shortly, so I will get out of here to get to those meetings. We can always provide you a readout, as we always do. We try to be very transparent about what the president is doing in the Oval Office. Perhaps he'll even call you in to join him. We never know around here, as you all know. But Governor Abbott is obviously a great friend and an ally to the president. He has been on the front lines of the border crisis in this country. And as for Governor Gavin Newsom, well, the president is willing to work with anybody from blue states or red states to do what's best for the American people. And the president really enjoyed his trip to Pacific Palisades last week. He felt very inspired by the frustration of the residents there. And he has been wholeheartedly committed to ensuring that the water is flowing in California to prevent these wildfires, and also that people have access to their properties. And he has continued to apply tremendous pressure to Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, I knew somebody
and also
had their
the
house
Los
burned
Angeles
down.
Mayor, to allow private residents and
In
property
California.
owners to access their property. He believes that's their right to do so, and they should be able to do it.
It
And one
sucks,
more
yeah.
thing before I wrap up, because I do want to get to these meetings, and I will see you all at the EO signing later this afternoon. I would just say that you brought to mind California and North Carolina, who continue to be on our hearts, and the president and this administration are committed to ensuring that these individuals get the funding that they need. And I would just say a strong message to Democrats who are out there pretending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this administration is cutting, federal waste and funding, like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan.
Oh, man.
I could go on, and I'm happy to provide this list to every single one of you. Democrats are outraged that the American people want to be, they want their taxpayers going to good uses, not stuff like this. But then they're very quiet about the fact that there are still North Carolinians and people in California who have lost everything. And in the last 4 years, this federal government did nothing to help them. This president will continue to put Americans first, and I think the successes of this week so far speak to that, and it's only Wednesday. So I'll see you guys later this week, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Man, that's fucking funny. That's so fucking funny to me. Oh my god. Wow. Yeah, there you go. And holy shit. And disinfo in Kazakhstan might be legit. All else is trash. Really? It might be legit? Is that how you spell America? I don't think it is, so I don't give a fuck. I'm sorry. I don't care what the fuck happens in Kazakhstan. Why would I care what happens in Kazakhstan? It's not my fucking problem. Okay, so yeah. Well, there you go. Wow. And so he's gonna sign that thing, getting rid of the dudes and women's sports and shit like that. Well, that's gonna be it. And wow, you plan on buying some land in Gaza after we activate all the terrorists in the region? I don't know, man. I have no idea. And so basically, Trump, if I'm understanding this right, the way that she said it, everybody found out that we were gonna do this in Gaza when Trump just said it. So there's like a 20% chance he just freeballed this. He just... What? Oh, God. Well, yeah, I don't know what to say about that, man. That's crazy.
Never felt so good.
Every day since Trump came into office, he bombards us with ridiculous policies. We go crazy trying to keep up with them, and before we can catch our breath, he hits us with something else even more absurd. It is exhausting and unsustainable. So, starting today, no more of that, okay? No more. A whole script here full of important issues that I want to talk about. And I'm not going to let Donald Trump distract me with some crazy new idea.
This morning, a stunning proposal from an American president. Donald Trump with the Israeli prime minister by his side, declaring that the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. We'll own it.
Okay, let me just ask, what? And also, what?
President Trump made a surprising suggestion last night during a press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The United States, he said, should take over the war-torn Gaza Strip and redevelop it into something like a seaside resort.
We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East.
What the f? Trump is going to turn Gaza into the Riviera? He couldn't even turn Atlantic City into a nicer Atlantic City. If anything, they tore down so many of his casinos, he turned Atlantic City into Gaza. But okay, he wants to rebuild it, and he wants to turn it into Mar-a-Lago. At least the Palestinians will have a place to go back to.
Donald Trump calling for the permanent resettlement of roughly 2 million Palestinians.
I don't think people should be going back to Gaza. I think that Gaza has been very unlucky for them.
And he says he's willing to use the U.S. military to do it.
We'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that.
Okay, just so I'm clear, your idea is to take over Gaza, rebuild it into Mar-a-Lago, and make sure that the Palestinians who live there can't go back? That is the craziest thing he said since yesterday and until tomorrow. Even his chief of staff was shocked. Look at her face. She looks just like she won Best Country Album at the Grammys. Of course she's shocked. He's effectively advocating for ethnic cleansing. Who could possibly be okay with that? He's effectively advocating...
What?
And of course she's shocked. He's effectively advocating for ethnic cleansing. Who could possibly be okay with that?
You see things others refuse to see.
Ethnic cleansing.
You say things others
that does
refuse
not
to say.
include killings.
And after the jaws drop,
okay,
people scratch their heads and they say, you know, he's right.
No, they usually scratch their heads and they say, what the f are you talking about? Of course, Bibi is ecstatic at Trump's idea. Look at him. He looks happier than a teenager getting a hand job in the back of a birthright bus. But Bibi aside, this proposal is giving a lot of people whiplash. Trump ran his whole campaign on America First, and now he's out there chanting from the Riviera to the sea. Even Trump's Republican allies aren't on board, although, of course, they have to let him down easy.
We're trying to get the details of it. It was a surprising development.
Senator Josh Hawley says, quote, I don't know that I think it's the best use of U.S. resources to spend a bunch of money in Gaza.
We also heard from Senator Lindsey Graham. I think most South Carolinians would probably not be excited about sending Americans to take over Gaza. I think that might be problematic.
Tom Tillis likely with the quote of the night, which was, there are probably a couple kinks in that slinky.
There's a couple kinks in that slinky. That's how desperate these guys are to not openly disagree with Trump. They're just making up sayings now. Of course, some of his supporters, like Steve Doocy, are trying to give Trump the benefit of the doubt.
It was a jaw-dropper last night. The cover of the New York Post is, we'll take over Gaza. I think this is just the tipping, this is the conversation starter. Because obviously, the president knows when he says, we'll take Gaza. He knows the United States can't invade another country.
Of course, America would never invade another country. You can read all about it in Steve Doocy's American history book, Me Just Got Lobotomy by Steve Doocy. So to summarize, MAGA people think this is dicey. Their eyeballs think it's batshit crazy. And the entire plan is DOA unless Trump can do some real outreach to the countries in the Middle East. And based on his response to reporters from Afghanistan, I don't think he has the skills to do it.
As a high expectation from you. Do you have any plan to change Afghanistan situation?
I have a little hard time understanding you. Where are you from? Oh, actually, it's a beautiful voice and a beautiful accent. The only problem is I can't understand a word you're saying. But I just say this, good luck, live in peace.
Good luck, live in peace? Why does he sound like he's saying goodbye to E.T.? The people of Earth wish you peace. May your slinky have no kinks. For more on Trump and Gaza, let's go live to the White House with Jordan Klepper. Jordan, is there something I'm missing? This plan just seems crazy.
Yeah, maybe it's not crazy. Maybe it's so good it sounds crazy, Desi. Maybe it's time to think outside the box. You know, they say it's better to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. But what if we did neither, you know? That's outside the box thinking.
Okay, but what's being proposed is a war crime. Have you considered that?
I'm desperately trying not to, Desi. I'd rather not contemplate American culpability here, so let's just think of this as the brainstorming phase. No bad ideas.
How about a two-state solution?
Bad idea, okay? Come on, Desi. Let's be serious here. You don't want to drive the Palestinians out? Fine. We'll drive them up. Put the entire Gaza Strip on 10-foot stilts, create a bunk bed situation. Palestinians on top, sing lullabies to the Israelis below, you know? Who says no to the top bunk? No one.
But the framework for a two-state solution already exists. There's no need for displacement.
Don't think of it as displacement, especially if you're a prosecutor at The Hague. Instead, how about this? How about this? Let's get some cruise ships and the Palestinians can explore the world. After a few years, they can come back refreshed with one of those little Jamaican hair braids, maybe a weird French accent whenever they say croissant, you know. Calling elevators lifts, all that bullshit.
Okay, but then they go back to live in Gaza?
No, then they get right back on the boat, you know. Another trip around the world, hair braids for all.
What was so wrong with the two-state solution idea?
Come on, Desi. If that idea existed the whole time, then what's happening right now would make us the bad guys. So let's just keep spitballing, okay? Here's one. We take every Israeli and Palestinian and surgically swap their faces. Now they don't know who's who, you know? Are you my wife or my neighbor? I can't tell. I guess we'll have to live in peace.
Are you pitching Face Off for the Middle East?
Okay. Do you have a better idea from a Nick Cage movie that doesn't make us complicit in war crimes?
Well, I guess we could get the Palestinians to fall in love with Cher. No,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
You're dragging me into this.
Look,
no.
I don't know what else to do, Desi. Maybe AI is the solution.
How would AI be the solution?
That's the first thing we'll ask AI.
Okay. No, that's it. Brainstorming is over. These are all stupid. And like it or not, bulldozing Gaza and kicking out everyone there is not a real solution. It's cruel. It doesn't make us safer, and it will undeniably make us look like the villains of history.
You know what, Desi?
Kicking out.
You might be right, but hear me out. What if Palestinians stole the Declaration of Independence?
Oh my God, get the out of here. Jordan Klepper, everyone.
I made a video about best jobs for autistic people recently, and one of the major conclusions was that sometimes it's not the industry or the specific job role that makes the difference, but things like how long is your commute, what is your office environment like, and the general culture of the workplace. How does your employer treat you, and are you able to access any accommodations? So today I'm going to talk through over 80 accommodations for autistic people, and I'm sure a lot of these could apply to other neurodivergent people as well, such as ADHDers. Some of these will be ways in which you can accommodate yourself, whether you're diagnosed or not, including some super helpful apps. And I'm also going to go through a load of accommodations that you could ask your employer for in the workplace, or you could use for yourself if you're self-employed, and also accommodations for school, for studying. Because even after a diagnosis, it can be super hard to ask for help if you don't know what's possible, if you don't know what you're entitled to. I hope this video can help a little tiny bit. Maybe some employers are watching. If any employers and teachers are watching, please note that all autistic people are different. It is a spectrum. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to supporting autistic people. It's always best to not make assumptions and to speak to the autistic person you're supporting about what they actually want and need. And remember that that person might be a little bit timid. I know I would be. They might feel like they aren't allowed, they aren't entitled to things that they actually do need. In my experience, autistic people can be
it's
quite
different to be
apologetic.
entitled and just
We can
need
have
something.
people-pleasing tendencies and not want to cause a fuss, not want to be
Like,
a burden. So we
you
might
could
need
need
a bit
a
of reassurance and encouragement.
amusement
Let's start with some
park,
apps
but that
you might
doesn't
find
mean
useful. I've
anyone.
got a mixture of things that I have enjoyed and things that I've seen recommended online, and then I asked on my community post for app recommendations, and you all came through, and by far the most highly recommended app on the community post was Finch. Finch is a virtual pet, a little bird, and you care for them by caring for yourself. You name your little pet and then you keep him healthy by reaching goals that you set for yourself, such as drinking enough water. I don't know if this would work for everybody. Maybe some of my PDAers, some autistic people who are more demand avoidant, this wouldn't work and your poor bird would suffer. I don't know, but maybe it's cute enough to override that. And I think for some people, and clearly for a lot of people on my community tab, the gamification of self-care can work really, really well. My neurotypical husband has actually used this app before himself, and he really loved it as well. So there we are, we have the neurotypical stamp of approval for whatever that's worth. On Reddit, I saw this comment, clinical psychotherapist here, I endorse this app, exclamation mark. It's like a hug when you didn't know you needed one. It teaches self-compassion. The next app is if you want to gamify brushing your teeth specifically. I don't know if anyone is like me. I remember having this moment when I was a child where I realized I will have to brush my teeth twice a day, every day for the rest of my life. And I remember thinking, even when it's school holidays and you know, like most expectations are calmed down and I'm supposedly having a relaxing day, I still have to brush my teeth. And I felt like this heaviness, the weight of the world on my shoulder. If you can relate to that feeling, there is an app called Pokemon Smile. It's aimed at children, but who cares? And I know many people watching also have neurodivergent children, so this might work really well, but even if you're just a Pokemon loving adult or you just find it super cute, it could be a way to just kind of give yourself a bit of novelty and to push yourself through what is often, you know, a non-preferred, non-enjoyable task. And yeah, you basically catch Pokemon by brushing your teeth. I love that this is something that exists. It makes me really excited. Warning, it does take some photos of you while brushing your teeth. And there's also Pokemon Sleep to gamify your sleep as well. Someone on the community tab said, Pokemon Sleep, it has helped me develop a decent sleep schedule. My insomnia isn't going anywhere, but the game motivates me to go to bed before the date rolls over, lol. The inspiration we needed. You can pair it with a smartwatch and you attract Pokemon by sleeping. There's an app called Tappy, which you can use in place of a fidget. It might be worth downloading in case you forget your fidget toys when you're out. If you're prone to forgetting, bringing them along. If something isn't attached to my body, I'm probably going to forget it, which is why I always revert back to just stimming, like pinching my neck rather than using fidget toys. But my phone is often quite close to my body. You can play little games on it as well. A lot of people seem to enjoy how it vibrates as you use it. Goblin Tools was another app that has come highly recommended. It's designed for neurodivergent people. It has a feature called the Magic To-Do List, which automatically breaks tasks down into smaller steps. You just type in the task and then it generates it in different steps. Plus there's an estimator, which can give you an idea of how long things might take. I spoke quite a lot in my recent video about signs you might be neurodivergent.
Magic To Do. That is really good.
to-do list, which automatically breaks tasks down into smaller steps. You just type in the task and then it generates it in different steps. Plus there's an estimator, which can give you an idea of how long things might take. I spoke quite a lot in my recent video about signs you might be neurotypical, about time blindness. So this could be helpful with that, although I did try asking it how long it thought it would take me to make a YouTube video, and it said 2 to 10 hours. I wish that was true. I think 10 hours is on the lower end. It's probably more like 10 to 40, but you tried Goblin Tools. It also has a formalizer that you can use to make your tone more professional or less professional, or a bunch of other things. Grammarly is also another one that I use. I have the plugin downloaded. I've had it for quite a few years and I really appreciate that. It's really helpful because I'm quite bad at making little errors and typos. I do it all the time and it catches a lot of them. Like, it will find something every time. It will find a mistake. The NHS Leicestershire partnership recommends time management and scheduling apps for autistic people, and I'm currently using Xtiles, which is a great way to organize your life for free, and Xtiles are also very kindly sponsoring this video. So if you know me, you know I don't love sticking to a routine, but I do need some way of keeping track of what I'm doing. We've just hit December. There's a lot going on. It's too much to hold in my brain, but I'm also diagnosed with dyspraxia. My handwriting is a mess. I need a digital planner. However, a lot of productivity apps are confusing and overwhelming. It takes ages to figure out how they work. Xtiles has been described as Notion for people who don't have the time or patience to figure out how Notion works, which definitely describes me. If my productivity app requires me to spend 2 weeks figuring out how to use it, then I'm not going to be being very productive, am I? You can use Xtiles on both computer and mobile. It will sync seamlessly. I think it's ideal for a lot of autistic people and ADHDers because it is so visual. Visual supports are often recommended for autistic people to communicate information clearly. With Xtiles, you could literally make a schedule entirely out of images if you wanted to. You add tiles to your various pages, hence the name Xtiles. Tiles are like digital sticky notes and they can contain video, audio, text, code, lists, and more. You can move your tiles around and change the colors. If you want to create a more traditional to-do list, you can click the new task button and then you just type in your task. You can also add a deadline and or reminders. Your tasks will appear in a menu in a convenient list, and you can integrate your calendar so your whole schedule appears in one place. If you need a bit more help designing your page, their template gallery is great with weekly and monthly planners, goals, trip planners. In my Xtiles project, Meg's Magical Notebook, I have a daily planner. I've also started thinking about goals for 2025, which sounds scary. A space for me to journal and a vision board for my new filming backdrop. I hope you like how it's coming along. It's not boxes anymore. The boxes are gone. If you want to try Xtiles for free, you can use the link in my description. The free version has so many features, but you can also go premium, which will give you extra features like setting up recurring tasks and access to more templates. Back to virtual pets again. There's something called Void Pet Garden. The art style looks super lovely, super cute. Enter Void Pet Garden, your mental health journal brought to life, where your emotions live as magical creatures. So you grow plants and nourish this garden by journaling about your mental health and your emotions, and then these plants attract void pets. There are other journaling mood tracking apps that you could try as well, such as How We Feel, and there's also Dailyo. If you love data and graphs, Dailyo might be the one for you. You can track your mood in relation to your activities so you can recognize patterns. And if you have a specific worry that you want to write down, you can download an app called Worry Dolls. Here's a description from the person who designed, which you can then tell your worry to. Over time, you can track the worry by telling the doll more about it. When the worry is finished, you can send the doll to the land of finished worries. Why do I want to cry? The intention is that you track your worries. You will see over time that they were not as bad as you feared. It's also a mindfulness technique to note what you're anxious about. Hope you like it. It's totally free, no ads, secure, and the data you enter doesn't leave your phone. No profit motive here. I am just an anxious person, so wanted to try to make something to help others. They sound really sweet. There's a chronic illness and mental health symptom tracker called Bearable, which also has a really cute art style. You can track emotions as well on on that one, but you can also track physical health, pain severity, energy levels, medications, goals. It seems like autistic people are more likely to have quite a few different chronic health conditions, so this could be a good one. Medisafe is a medication management app that can remind you to take your medication. There's an app called Ahoy, which I think is just currently available in the US and Canada, but it's an app where disabled people can rate businesses and public places on whether or not they're accessible. This started out for the limited mobility community, but they've just added a section for sensory needs too. You might find meditation, mindfulness, soundscape apps helpful too. I've spoken about Aura in the past. There's also Endel, Headspace, MyNoise. If you have to work in a public space and you find sounds distracting, putting on your headphones and listening to some sort of soundscape can be great. I always quite like rain noise and things like that. That can be helpful for falling asleep too. Speaking of mindfulness, there's an app called Buzzkill, and this helps you manage notifications. As somebody who finds notifications, I don't know, I feel like my soul leaves my body when I'm interrupted by a notification. So here are some of the things that Buzzkill does. So Buzzkill can provide a cooldown so you don't get buzzed multiple times when someone messages you multiple times in quick succession. You can also set a custom sound or vibration pattern for a specific contact or phrase, and it will also automatically swipe away any notification you don't want to see without hiding all notifications for that one particular app, so you can maybe be a bit more selective about the notifications that you get. A lot of autistic people do tend to struggle with interruptions. If you want to know more about that, I have a video about the theory of monotropism, which might explain if you are that way, so this one could be super helpful. Someone mentioned Character AI on the community post, which has different user-made chatbots. Discord can be a great option. I have a Discord community which is connected to my Patreon, so you have to be joined to my Patreon. You can join any tier on the Patreon and then you get access to the Discord server as well. You just need to link your Discord to Patreon. You also get access to all of my exclusive content on there as well if you join, and it's a lovely space, lots of different channels for lots of different interests, and if you find it overwhelming you can mute channels that don't apply to you as well. But there are loads of other Discord servers, and there are lots of free Discord servers. There's like a Taylor Swift Discord server, say if Taylor Swift was a special interest, where you can chat and meet people. It can be a lot easier for autistic people to do, you know, written communication. I find that a lot easier sometimes, and yeah, you could end up finding that you make some real life friends. I've met some people in real life from my Discord server, which was really lovely. But yeah, before it gets too soppy, let's move on to some workplace accommodations. So first of all, we have being able to wear noise cancelling headphones in the office, and or being allowed to play music while you work. This would be a big one for me, allowing you not to wear uniform or a more sensory friendly variation of a uniform. Being allowed to work from home or hybrid could be super helpful. This might be something if you're currently searching for a job to prioritize in your job search, because I think that could make a huge difference. Flexible hours could also be super helpful. Like some autistic people have interesting body clocks. Sometimes we don't work super well to a typical schedule. I'm filming this at midnight, of course. A flexible start and end time might be possible, so you can avoid rush hour traffic or like super busy public transport if you find that overwhelming. And being allowed to work flexible hours and having a flexible start time could be super helpful if you struggle with time blindness and feel a lot of anxiety about having to be there at, you know, like one specific time. I used to really struggle with this. When I went into work at Lush, it was really hard for me to get there on time and not be ridiculously early or slightly late. It might be an option for you to leave work early if you become overwhelmed, or maybe go and do the rest of the day from home if you become overwhelmed, and or maybe at work they could give you access to a dimly lit quiet space for you to go into to recover if you are feeling overwhelmed. Being given your own office might be possible, where you can control things like the lighting and the temperature of the room. If that's not possible, you might be able to have your own desk space. Some workplaces do something called hot desking, where people just, you know, pick which desk they want when they get there on the day, which I think I would personally find really stressful. So having a desk that is your own, that you can try and, you know, make as sensory friendly as possible for whatever your specific needs are. Being allowed to have
have a fan or maybe an electric heater at your desk to help you to regulate your temperature is another one. And this is something you could do to accommodate yourself, but if you are time blind like me, having a visual timer to help you keep track of time, although sometimes I find this quite anxiety inducing. I'm time blind, but I often will hide the time on my laptop and things like that, so I can't see it because it stresses me out, the feeling of time slipping away. I think it just can be quite unsettling when I get into hyperfocus and time just zooms by so fast. I don't like it. I don't like my day disappearing. Come back. And having a desk in a quieter place might be helpful for some autistic people so they're away from distractions. I found it near impossible to study in college during free periods when there were even just little sounds. In exams I found it really hard as well, just sounds of people, you know, clicking their pen, coughing. Might not affect all autistic people, but for some of us it can really pull us out of what we're doing and be quite jarring. Making colleagues aware that interruptions are hard for an autistic person, if that is the case, could be super useful. I think having colleagues be aware of how you prefer to be approached and communicated with and whether you like being touched or not could be really helpful in general. Whether or not you want to disclose to everybody, it might be helpful to have a workplace buddy, you know, somebody who can explain to you the social rules, check in on you, make sure you're doing okay. Maybe, you know, if you don't want to tell the entire office, that could be one person aside from your manager who is aware that you are autistic. Regular meetings with your manager to reassure you that you're on the right track might help you
Good
to
one.
ease anxiety.
Very
Being
good
offered
one.
a quiet space to eat lunch as
Talked
well.
about
A
it
few
for
years ago I had
years.
to do this kind of
Zero
training
fucks
thing
given.
with a bunch of people I didn't know, and every
Unless-
lunchtime I ran away to my car, and it was blissful to sit on my own in my
there was
car and
about
just
all
get
the
a bit of
employer,
time to
all the
recover. And also being a bit
employees.
flexible about when you take your lunch, so you can take
Rather
your
than
lunch
just
at a quieter
me.
time. Say if you do want to eat in like a canteen, being allowed to skip certain meetings if they're not that important. Again, being allowed to leave meetings if you're feeling overwhelmed, if it's not too disturbing, being allowed to get up and walk around if you feel restless, or being allowed to use a fidget, and just in general using a fidget around the office. An Ono roller, Ono roller, I'm not sure how to say that, but those seem to come highly recommended, and they're very quiet. Apparently it's supposed to be like the feeling of rolling two highlighter pens together, but there are loads of different types of fidgets. I've also seen people recommend jewelry or key rings with little beads on them that you can fidget with. Being allowed breaks after working with clients or doing work that's more social in nature. This person on TikTok shared that their manager had allowed this.
Having breaks after meetings or clients. Now, if you don't work with clients, that is fine, but if you have work meetings or anything in work where there's going to be like a high amount of stress or social interaction, then you can just ask to have a break after this. It's an extra break and not taken off your lunch. Some managers might say, yeah, okay, take 5 minutes off your lunch. No. The adjustment is that you get that extra 5 minutes.
Oh, this is a big one. Permission to skip team building exercises and retreats and social gatherings and things like Christmas parties, you know, without anybody being offended or taking it personally. If you have a part-time job, being able to
I
work
mean,
the same
they're
hours every
offended,
week could be super
that's their
helpful. I know
problem,
when
though.
I worked at Lush as a sales assistant, you'd be maybe given a
Hey
couple of
everyone,
weeks notice on what
Katie
days you'd
is
need
gonna
to be
be
working, and it would have been nice
absent
to know, like,
for this
I work
team
Mondays
building,
between this hour
so
and this hour.
I
Then
advise
sometimes
you
I'd
to
get
not
there
be
and they'd be like,
offended.
oh,
How the
we might
fuck
want you
does
to
that
stay an
sound?
extra few hours if
But
you
okay.
can, and you'd feel kind of like you couldn't say no in the moment. I didn't always mind, but like for some autistic people that might be super stressful, and I think also you could maybe make it clear to your employer that you'd rather not be asked on the day if you could do any extra hours, because I know for some people, people pleasing will kick in and will find it difficult to say no. But yeah, having the predictability, even in a full-time role for some autistic people, of like a daily schedule could be super helpful. I think for me, I'm somebody who can be a little bit more impulsive than some autistic people, but I would still find it super stressful if I got into work and I'd been
Oh, that's gonna be
expecting that I was
nice.
going to do one thing, and then they were like, oh, we need you to actually throw that all away and make a phone call to someone you've never spoken to before. before, I would prefer to know what I was doing in advance, and I think a lot of autistic people would. Being warned of all meetings or any sort of change to the usual routine in advance, and also being told what meetings will be about beforehand. Maybe you could even be emailed notes of important topics that will be covered within the meeting. Similarly, when you're having a job interview, it might be helpful to be emailed the questions before the job interview. Some people only like to disclose their diagnosis after they've actually got a job, which is completely fine. In general, always keeping instructions and expectations clear and precise and explicit, not expecting your employees to read between the lines or fill in the gaps. I'd really recommend this book, Unmasked by Ellie Middleton. I read and reviewed it over on my Patreon. There's an hour-long kind of like cozy vlog styled video of me going through this over on Patreon. I also did a Ryan Kelly's book, Autism Feels. But there's a lot of great sections about potential workplace accommodations in this book. I will leave a link to it in the description. On page 254, Ellie talks about the what, by when, and why framework, which I really love. So it goes, what exactly do you need from me? When exactly do you need each of these things by? Why exactly do you need each of those things to be done? And I think the why is really big and important, because I think sometimes people can misinterpret autistic people needing to know the why behind what they're doing as them kind of questioning authority or trying to undermine somebody. I think it can help us to understand the task at hand more, like this is the expected outcome, so now I know I need to do these steps in this way, and it all makes a bit more sense. Also, remember that autistic people might need a bit more time to process information, and with this one you can always accommodate yourself as well by kind of having certain set phrases that you say to give yourself more time. I have learned over time that I shouldn't respond to things on the spot on the phone, because I can end up agreeing to things that I don't actually want to agree to. So most of the time, if somebody asks me a question on the phone, because I find phone calls quite stressful and maybe not in my right mind, I'll say, oh, okay, let me just look into that and I'll get back to you, or I'll discuss it with, you know, my partner or whatever, and then I'll give you an email back, you know, whatever's appropriate for the situation. Just try and give myself some more time, and people are always fine with that. But I think an employer having patience with you is really important. I used to get in trouble as a child sometimes because I'd be asked to do something and then I'd kind of freeze and be like, oh, what was I asked to do? What do I need to do? And how do I need to do that? And it can take autistic people a while to pivot from whatever was going on in their head, whatever track they were on, and pull themselves away from that and go, okay, now I'm doing this other thing. And so sometimes we might just need a bit more time. You know, it's this whole autistic inertia thing, which I spoke about in this video, that we can struggle with. Again, it's all linked to the theory of monotropism. It's not somebody being lazy or rude if it takes them a while to process what you've asked them to do. And it isn't an indication that somebody's going to be, you know, bad at completing that task. I know I definitely struggle with verbal instructions. Again, particularly if they're over the phone, I tend to spend the entirety of any phone calls I do writing down what the person's saying, and I'll literally just write down anything. They're like, hi, how are you? I'm writing it down to make sure that I don't miss anything, and I often forget what's said. I remember this time where I had a health issue and I needed to go to an out-of-hours doctor. It was kind of quite urgent, and they said the name of a healthcare center near me, and I just quickly jotted down what I thought I heard, but I wasn't sure. But in the moment, I don't think to ask them to repeat themselves, and I'm kind of in people-pleasing mode and just focusing on being pleasant on the phone and saying the right things and kind of getting off the phone as quickly as possible sometimes. And then afterwards I was like, I have no idea what that is, and I had to sit there on Google and try and deduce which one the name that I'd written down, which was completely wrong, was most similar to. I did eventually find it, luckily, in time for the appointment that I booked. I don't know, I was lucky with that one. I think written instructions can be a lot easier. Verbal instructions can poof out of your mind if you struggle with working memory, which is again something I spoke about in my most recent video about signs that you might be neurotypical, but is actually a sign that you might be neurodivergent. Just generally being allowed to communicate in your preferred style. So if you prefer communicating by email, some autistic people hate email and might prefer speaking over the phone or via video call so they can see your face, or just in person, face to face. And it might be useful to use AAC or sign language if you find yourself unable to speak. This was a big one. If you are going to have a phone call, being told what the phone call is going to be about ahead of time, because I think we can struggle a lot with the uncertainty of around social interactions. I hate it when somebody leaves me a voicemail and they do not tell me what they were calling about, and I have to call them back and I have no idea. When people just leave a voice message like, just call me back as soon as you can, it makes you stressed. You feel like it's an emergency, like it's going to be something really bad, and usually it's like nothing. It's like, you could have just told me that in a few sentences. You might also be able to ask for help with time management and prioritization of tasks, but this is probably quite individual. For some autistic people, they might find it annoying or like micromanagey. For both school and work, providing information and worksheets on colored paper can be quite useful if you struggle to read black text on white paper. So that's a nice transition into school/studying accommodations. So once again, being allowed to either wear noise cancelling headphones or ear defenders in school, being allowed to wear sunglasses, being allowed to use a fidget in class, extra time in exams. Oh my goodness, I wish I had access to this. This can be helpful for a load of different types of neurodivergence. I wasted a lot of time in exams stressing and worrying about being perfect, and sometimes I'd write a full paragraph and I'd cross the whole thing out because I'd feel like it wouldn't be perfect, and sometimes I would end up missing big high mark questions towards the end of the exam because I'd wasted time trying to be perfect at the start of the exam. Some people on my community tab shared that they've been able to get an extra 50% added on to their exam time, which sounds just amazing. Breaks in exams may also be helpful. I was kind of accidentally given this accommodation by having panic attacks. I was allowed to go into a toilet cubicle this one time and I was given a mint by a teacher to try and calm me down. So yeah, actual organized breaks maybe might help to prevent the mental breakdown. Being allowed to take exams in a smaller or a private room. After I dropped out of college, I did some studying through distance learning, and then I went to high school to do the exams. And I remember being put in a private room for one of them, being put in like a teacher's office, and I was just left there. And it was fine until unfortunately all of the students were let out of lesson, and then they all rushed into the corridor and they were outside the door, and it was so loud. And I don't know why they chose to put me there. That was not very sensory friendly, and I'm sat there trying to write this essay and I can hear, you know, high school students in the corridor. It wasn't supposed to be an autism accommodation, so hopefully if this is done as an accommodation, it will be a quiet private room. Numerous people on my community tab also said they were actually allowed to listen to music during an exam to help with focus, which is pretty cool. Being allowed to eat lunch privately or with just one other student or with a teacher while at school. I used to actually eat lunch in the classroom because my best friend actually had selective mutism. So because she didn't like to eat in front of other people, I was able to sit with her. So I got an accidental accommodation through her, which was great because a few times that I did have to go into the dining hall in primary school, it was so loud with all the clashing cutlery and the overlapping conversations. It was really unpleasant and smelly. Really smelly. People's lunches stink. I was also allowed to go home for lunch for a time. This was an accidental autism accommodation that I was given because I was struggling with school avoidance and not wanting to go into school and finding it too much. They were like, okay, you can have a break in the middle of the day, you can go home for a while. Because I wasn't diagnosed, when I was given these kind of accidental, in quotation marks, accommodations, there was always kind of an underlying expectation of, we can give you this for a short time, but you need to sort yourself out. This can't go on for a long time. Whereas I feel like if I was diagnosed, maybe I could have just been accepted and it could have just been allowed. So maybe Meg just needs a break in the middle of the day. So my mom used to walk and pick me up, used to walk home, eat some buttered pasta, watch a bit of TV, and then come back to school. And it was really helpful to have that little break. Just being allowed to finish the school day earlier or do half days sometimes. I don't know how it works in other countries, but in the UK in primary school, your lunch tends to be split between eating in the lunch hall and also playing on the playground. And at my school, we had a boy who was diagnosed autistic, and he was allowed to read in the classroom. And I asked if I could be allowed to do the same thing. I was super jealous, and I was told no, because, you know, like, autistic, you're not autistic, so you can't do that, and you must socialize. You seem social enough to be socializing, so you need to go out. Yeah, I've still not got over that. I'm still bitter. It was one of my favorite teachers who did that to me as well. She was like, oh, if you read on the playground, I'm sure in no time children will come up to you and want to talk to you and ask you about what you were reading. And I was there thinking, I don't want anyone to come and ask me what I'm reading. I just want to read. And I I think it would have been so helpful to just have a nice peaceful moment rather than being out on the playground with a bunch of screaming children, because, you know, like the rest of the day you have to socialize quite a lot. You know, you're doing group tasks and things like that. Like the whole day is a social experience. So yeah, just having that bit of break time would have been blissful for me. It reminds me of this meme that's like, you'll have fun with the others. And then she says, but I was already having fun. Yeah, I don't know, this expectation that like socializing is always peak fun. Like that doesn't always apply to autistic people. Some people in the community tab mentioned being allowed to sit out of events. In America, things like pep rallies, which I think can be quite loud. In the UK, I guess our equivalent would be big assemblies. Maybe you could stay back in the classroom and read, maybe. Being excused from fire drills or being given prior warning. Not being called on in class to answer questions if you find this super overwhelming and anxiety inducing. Freedom to leave the classroom if you're feeling overwhelmed is a big one that I know a lot of students in the UK are able to do. You might have some sort of pass or card that you can show the teacher. Some schools might have a sensory room, which would be really lovely, that you could go to, or just, you know, maybe a quiet space. Being allowed to leave a class early before the end of the class so you have a bit more time to get to your next lesson if things are spread far apart, particularly in high school or college. You can avoid the big rush. I don't know what your high school was like, but the corridors were always crammed full of people. There was a lot of pushing and shoving, and it was pretty scary. Maybe you could be allowed to come into or leave school a bit earlier or later for the same reason as well. Ooh, a big one, being allowed to use a laptop to take notes, particularly if you have a dyspraxia diagnosis, as well as many autistic people do. Allowing you to have freedom over where you sit in a classroom or not being moved from your set seat. I used to have so much anxiety. There were a few times where I had to go and speak to a teacher and ask, please, will you move me back? And luckily, sometimes they did. Being allowed to use alternative forms of communication when necessary. So if you feel like you're unable to speak, if you shut down, writing things down, maybe using AAC, maybe using sign language. I guess it's just having teachers be aware that this is something that can happen to you. It's a real thing. It's not you being, you know, rude or naughty or anything like that. Someone in my community tab said their school stopped marking them down for spelling unless the assignment was about their spelling, and that their grades really shot up when this happened. I think that's super fair. We have spell checker these days. Again, this could be another reason why using a laptop in class could be great if you maybe are dyslexic as well and you struggle with spelling. I'd have loved to do exams on computer because like I would have got less stress and I wouldn't have had the whole thing of like crossing things out, because I could have just like backspace. I don't know, it wouldn't have been as panic inducing. You might be able to be given access to an audiobook version of a book you're reading in class. Sometimes it can be helpful for neurodivergent people to listen to an audiobook and read a book at the same time, allowing you to extend due dates or be a bit more flexible about when assignments are handed in could be great. I'm currently studying with distance learning through the Open University, and they're super flexible about extending assignment dates, and I find this reduces the anxiety and kind of the demand avoidance that I experience around it so much. Someone on my community tab says they have quite a rigid process, and that can mean that it takes them longer to complete assignments. Maybe there's set steps that you feel like you have to do. A lot of autistic people, it's been documented for like as long as autism has been documented, that a lot of us are perfectionists, and that can mean that it takes you longer to do stuff. And yeah, for me this was definitely true. I could be quite slow with finishing assignments. I think being given assignments early is another way potentially around the whole demand avoidance thing. I've got a few videos about the pathological demand avoidance profile of autism, but a lot of autistic people, whether you identify with that or not, experience demand avoidance. We can find it difficult to do stuff when we're told to do stuff. I think sometimes it's better to think of it as demand anxiety. It can be really stressful to feel like you have to do something at a certain date, and that can cause procrastination. Again, a lot of people who identify with this whole demand avoidance thing are perfectionists. I find doing things early can make me feel like I've won. I've got one over on them. Ha! You told me to do it by this date. I actually did it 2 weeks before. So there, in your face. That's kind of like, instead of doing it late, I can win, in quotation marks, by doing it early. Or doing things in like the wrong order. I don't know. I really like with the Open University that you can see a lot of your assignments in advance. And yeah, this might be a useful thing for your autistic students as well, to let them know what they can expect is coming up throughout the year so that they can mentally plan. Particularly with university, you might be able to access a recording if you miss a lecture, and you might be able to record in class yourself too. You might be able to get more information about a class ahead of time, like the teacher could send you the presentation that they're going to do, so you just kind of are aware of what's coming up and maybe can do a bit of reading about it beforehand, or be sent the presentation after the fact if you struggle with note taking. Again, as I said with the jobs thing, just being allowed to ask questions, being allowed to ask why without a teacher taking it personally or taking it as if you're questioning their teaching style would be really nice. We just tend to like direct communication and like to know completely what is going on and what is expected of it. Being allowed to not do presentations or opting out of group work as well. This was an accommodation that I accidentally got as well. I'd often ask, can I just do the task on my own? And I would be told yes, usually, which was nice. But if you do have to do a presentation, maybe presenting to a smaller group of people or presenting to just the teacher could be an option if this makes you anxious. Some autistic people love public speaking. Being allowed to take on fewer subjects to reduce overwhelm. Sometimes you don't need to actually do as many subjects as they sign you up for to get into college or university. Similar to working from home, some autistic people might be able to switch to online school or homeschooling. I wish I had been homeschooled. I probably would have been if I had been diagnosed, but who knows, my whole life would be completely different, so I can't really dwell. When I look at that list, I think it mainly just comes down to kindness and willingness to take the time to understand somebody's neurodivergence and to take it seriously and maybe research and find out what that label actually means and understand that student or employee's specific presentation as well. As I say, it will not be one size fits all. Take what you want from this list, of course, and just leave the rest. And it's not an exhaustive list. I could do a whole nother one, probably. So look around online, you might find even more, note them all down.
Let's get this party started. Let's have some fun. Being never felt so good.
what is the universe?
Damned if I know.
You ever hear of the simulation hypothesis?
Yes.
Okay, well, the simulation hypothesis is basically the idea that the reality we see around us, physical reality, is simulated on some sort of an automaton or a computer.
Yeah, some aliens somewhere have just, they've fooled us.
Right, exactly. Oh, eat a piece of liquid.
Before one launches into the simulation, one needs a little sustenance,
Sustenance.
Okay, so anyway, the idea is that you've got some kind of an automaton running. You've got a simulation running on it. And God, it's more panentheistic. You know what panentheism is?
I do. I think I do. But that means that we are in God. Let me know how I've gone wrong. We are in God, and God is in us. And it is not merely that God and the creation are one and the same, but they are quite related. Is that something approaching panentheism?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
There's the idea is that you've got the physical universe that you see around you, but God is not confined to the physical universe.
Okay.
See, there's an ordinary pantheist assumes that God is somehow confined to the universe, that there is just what we see around us, and God is in every piece of it. God is distributed over it.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more complex than that, because this part of the universe that we see around us cannot exist just by itself.
Yeah.
Okay? There are certain things that it entails. And when you go into those entailments, that's how you get to God. That's how you get to the identity of reality. Okay? And now to get back to the reality of self-simulation, or at least that's what I call it, self-simulation. But to get back to the simulation hypothesis, that we're living in the display of that simulation. In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect, okay? And God, it captures both of those things. He captures both the display and the processing.
What do you mean? I hate to put it in the...
Well, I mean, okay, here's the display. You realize the display contains states.
Yeah.
Okay, you see things, the objects contain states. States are static.
Yeah.
That's why they're called states. Yeah. Okay, static. How do they change? Well, they have to be processed. Something has to process.
Yeah.
And in the calculus, for example, those are tiny little infinitesimal intervals, okay? But they are not actually contained in the states themselves. They have a neighborhood, a little tangent space or what have you, where you can sort of draw little vectors that suggest that some kind of processing is going on. But the idea of being a state and being a process, those are two different things in the ordinary way of looking at it, okay? It turns out that you can't properly describe reality and causation at all unless you put those things together somehow. And that's what it takes God to do. Okay? God provides the processing functionality for your state. You have an internal state, an external state. You're a material human being. Right? But to explain how that is changing through time and maintaining its coherence through time, even as it changes, that's what you need God for.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that entirely. And so I might not be sophisticated enough to parse all of the quibbles that there might be, but broadly speaking, as a Christian, so much of what you're saying resonates as obviously true for me. The idea that, well, I'm a member of the body of Christ. The idea that God creates the world in this great act of love, this great act of charity.
Self-love.
And yeah, well,
self-love. Don't forget, you're an image of God.
Right.
So in loving Himself, God loves you.
And God, and
you're supposed to love God back.
Right, and this ties into something like the Trinity, right? The idea that God is three persons in one divine unity. So all of this is making a lot of sense to me.
God is a psychopath.
Now, how do I make sense of consciousness?
Well, ordinarily, you know what quantum mechanics, you know what quantization is?
I know the word.
Well, you decide what the ultimate irreducible objects are.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the quanta in terms of which you reason. It turns out that in order to quantize that theory that I was talking about, that theory of identity, where you've got the display and you've got the processor, and it's handling both. It turns out that in order to handle both of those things, you need a certain kind of quantum. That quantum is called an identity operator. God is the identity. So obviously these little quanta, they have to be, they're doing things, they're processing, so we can call them operators, right? They are identity operators, okay? The identity operator basically it takes input from the outside world, recognizes it or accepts it using syntax, processes it, and then returns it to the world as external state. Okay, so things come in, then they're processed, right? There's throughput, which is, you could call that the subjective or internal state of the identity operator, and then it's returned to the external universe.
But are you attributing now?
So what I'm saying is that's consciousness. And I'm saying that consciousness exists in every part of the universe because those are the quanta.
That's what I'm asking. Are you telling me that this table is conscious?
In that sense, yes. Generically conscious. But it's relying on our consciousness to do it. There's levels of quanta, okay? These are tertiary quanta. They're all put together using physical localistic forces, right? But those are underdeterminative. They don't fully determine what happens. Why? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, for example, it tells you that, you know, the quantum rules, they're probabilistic.
Right.
They don't actually determine events, okay? So what determines events? We do. We don't know how we do it, but we do it. When everybody's will is put together, we're all creating the best possible universe we can for ourselves. And God is what harmonizes all of our different perspectives and makes things happen for all of us at the same time. And if we were doing things correctly, this would be the best of all possible worlds. Sadly, however, we oftentimes make mistakes. And that's what we have to get out of doing, but we can't get out of doing it until we understand what reality is, what we are, and what the relationship between those two things is.
Now, you've mentioned two things that raise a new question for me, which is you mentioned this idea of simulation, just the simulation or self-simulation, and you've mentioned us doing things. So then it would seem to me we have to tackle the question, do we really do much of anything at all, in the sense, do we have free will?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I always thought we did.
Well, yes, we have to have free will. I was discussing with you earlier the idea of a fixed array. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, now, modern physics know basically what you've got is you've got a bunch of quantum fields in superposition, and then those fields consist of little fluctuations, little quantum fluctuations, right? Where is the fixed array? We were talking about a manifold, right, with a bunch of zero-dimensional points.
Yep.
Okay? Those two things are not compatible. Okay? Quantum field theory and that fixed array manifold where you can parameterize all of the causal functions using the manifold, that doesn't work. Okay? Those two things don't fit together.
Now, you explained to me when we were speaking about this earlier, you put this into even more layman's terms, and it has already flown out of my head. Can you put that into more basic terms, what you've just said?
But what was it you need to understand about this? What are you actually
why are these two concepts you're describing, why are they not reconcilable? What is the problem with these?
Oh, I explained that to you already. That's what, okay, all right. It consists of zero-dimensional points, limit points, or cuts. I told you what a Dedekind cut was, right?
Yep.
These limit points have zero extent. They're exact locations, and that's a cut. You're actually, you've got something on one side of the point, and then you've got something on the other side of the point, and any line that you draw through the point itself is going to be cut by the point.
Yep.
Okay, so we call that a cut. Okay, and the cut is zero-dimensional, which means that it has no extent at all. It's an exact location. It's precise.
Yep.
No extent. It's not smeared out. Okay.
Yeah.
If you take all of those points and you add them together, you get zero.
Right.
Because no matter how many times you add zero to itself, you just get zero. And because the manifold consists of those points, that's what you have to do to find out the extent of the manifold.
Okay.
So what this is telling you is that the manifold itself has zero extent. There's nothing there. So the real manifold of classical physics is a paradoxical construct. Okay? So that's why those two things, that's why that doesn't work with quantum field theory and the idea that things are quantum fluctuations and fields. That's why, as a matter of fact, that particular concept of the real manifold, that doesn't work for anything at all. It's a conceptual convenience. We can reason about reality in terms of it, and we can actually get to some very interesting conclusions.
Okay.
Using it.
You're right.
But it doesn't work in the long run, okay? And because it doesn't work, most causal functions, of course, are parameterized in terms of this manifold.
Okay.
Okay? In other words, you take, you've got X, Y, and Z axes, and the forces that exist, the forces that cause things to happen, right? Those forces are all directed along one of those axes. That's what a force is, right? Okay? When you take away the points, those zero-dimensional points, now all of that disappears. The basis of causation has just fled the coop, right?
Okay.
Because you no longer have little points, the tails of the little vectors that point there. You can no longer parameterize your causal functions using those points and vectors. So what do you do to get causal functions? Well, it turns out you have to use something called advanced causation. And you combine that with advanced causation is called retrocausation. You combine that with ordinary retarded causation, and you get something else entirely. It's called metacausation in the CTMU.
So
it's referred to using two operations, one of which is called conspansion, and the other which is called suboperation, called telic recursion.
Because when we're talking about free will, often the conversation, especially these days, becomes this sort of shallow discussion of, well, this caused this, and I'm going to describe a totally deterministic system, and so as a result of this causing this, causing this, causing this, you don't have free will. And you're saying cause is actually more complicated than just cause.
That's correct. In other words, talking about free will in those terms is osios. Means nothing.
Yeah.
You can't get anywhere with it, okay? Reality is actually generative, okay? It's not a fixed manifold. Everything is being created all the time. Not just our states. Our states are being recreated, right? I can cross my legs, I can uncross my leg. That's the changing state.
Yeah.
But the medium around us is changing. When I look at you, I'm seeing Michael Knowles, okay? I'm seeing you sitting there. But that means that I'm seeing your boundary. I'm seeing what distinguishes you from the external environment, right? There's a medium around you. So I have to be regenerating that at the same time as I'm regenerating your state in my head, okay? When I say regenerating, so there's a reason I'm doing that. I could also say I'm recognizing Michael Knowles, I'm recognizing your state right now, but I'm also recognizing the state of the medium around you, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to distinguish you from the medium, and you wouldn't exist at all.
Right, right. Well, it's sort of like a little baby, right? Has trouble recognizing the limits of things and recognizing what some individual object might be from, the glass on the table. They have trouble distinguishing those things.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Okay, the baby has to learn to distinguish those boundaries. And it has to receive the right visual cues at the right age so that it can actually learn how to do that.
Yeah. So now we're at metacausation. So what does metacausation
Causation works from past to future, okay? Metacausation works from past to future and from future to past in a closed loop. It's called a conspansive cycle.
Okay.
Okay? So that's basically what we have to do to quantization in order to make causality work. And of course, when I say causality, I mean metacausation. Okay?
So how does...
Because ordinary past to future causality, parameterized by a fixed array, that doesn't work.
So I get past to future. This seems pretty simple. I pick up the glass of water, I put it over here, and now I remember 2 seconds ago that water was over here, and then I caused it to go over there.
Right.
So how do you cause something to go from the future to the past?
It can't go anywhere unless there's some place for it to go.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, okay?
Yeah.
This is, in the universe, everything changes with time. You're actually, in the theory of relativity, for example, all the points are events.
Yep.
Okay, and that means that there's a time parameter involved. Okay? So when you take that glass and you move it from there to there, okay, you think that there's a point right there where you're going to move that glass. That's false. Okay? The point to which you are going to move that glass is actually in the future. When you pick up that glass, it's still in, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, okay, that makes sense. And then getting back to God, I guess we're always trying to get back to God. God is outside of time and space.
Well, God distributes over time and space, and there's some left over. Time and space is static. It's a display.
Yeah.
Imagine that you're a little homunculus inside a computer display, like the Matrix, for example, okay? God not only distributes over that, but there's a whole other domain where God exists. And that's the processing domain. That's the non-terminal domain in the CTMU. We're in the terminal domain, right? And most physicists, when they try to reason about the terminal domain, They reason under physical confinement. Okay, well, I can only look at physics. And I have to use what I know about physics, what I can observe about physics, to explain everything else that I explain. So they have that kind of explanatory closure going right there.
So speaking of this non-terminal domain, in a really basic question, I'm not going to ask you if I'm going to go to heaven or hell, but will I go to either heaven or hell?
You will persist after you die, okay? Where you go depends on who Michael Knowles really is. And you would know that better than anyone.
Yeah, I hope I know that better than. But you're telling me I'm going somewhere.
Yes.
You're confident of that. I don't just evaporate. I don't just turn into oblivion.
Well, you can. If you displease God, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. God is going to cut you off, and he's going to say, I can't see him anymore. He's going to turn away from you, and then you won't be able to reunite. Salvation will be impossible for you, because salvation means that God has got to pull you back into himself.
Right.
Okay, but God doesn't want to see you anymore. He doesn't even know you exist. He knows your physical body is there, but he's not interested anymore because you hate him, you deny his existence, you offend him, so he's not going to look at you, right? So now what happens? Well, okay, you're dead. You still want to live. There's something in you that still desperately wants to live, so it's still going to be there. What happens now? Well, you try to create your own world for yourself, but if you're a bad person or you're an evil person, what kind of world is that going to be? It's going to be an evil world, and that's what we call hell.
This is what John Milton says in The Mouth of Satan. He says, the mind is its own place, and it can make a hell of heaven or heaven a hell.
Now you got it.
It reminds me of Dante also, this idea of God turning away. The very deepest part of hell is Satan frozen in a lake of ice of his own making because of the flapping of his own wings, because he's apart from the warmth of God.
Precisely.
Okay.
That's the way it has to work.
So we've gotten through death, judgment, heaven and hell, free will, and God.
Not completely. There's a lot more to be said.
Well, and we still have some time. I mean, fortunately, on my usual show, there is about 30 seconds to come to any conclusion about anything. And thankfully, I am not bringing Chris Lang into Nashville to talk for 10 minutes. This is going to be a much longer discussion. So, for this discussion, would you like a cigar?
Sure.
Good.
I haven't smoked a cigar in a long time.
Oh, excellent. You know, the body is a temple. The temple needs incense.
I did. Back in the day, I used to enjoy a cigar every now and then. Good cigar.
I'm glad you liked it. This is one of my favorite cigars that's come out. You know, if you were on the Joe Rogan show, they would offer you something a little stronger. But we're going to keep it to tobacco on this show, I think.
I think I've seen a couple of, I've seen the Rogan show a couple of times. He was talking about some kind of drugs. At that point in his career, I think that's all he was talking about.
Yeah. Did you ever get into drugs? I'm not saying, you know, just because you were around bars in New York, but even the drugs that everyone says expand your mind and anything like that.
Well, you couldn't really grow up in the era when I grew up around the kind of people I was surrounded with without trying, you know, some drugs. I don't have a substance abusive tendency in my body. I just don't have any bad habits except for this.
He's licorice and candy.
Oh man, I love this stuff. It's addictive.
It is.
But I have to hide it from myself. I don't have any in the house right now.
But you never got, because I would always have people tell me, especially in college, they'd say, Michael, you have to drop acid. You have to smoke this. You have to take mushrooms. It's going to expand your mind. And I thought, you know, my brain, such as it is pretty much all I got. I'm not exactly the captain of the football team. And if some drug messes up my brain, I'm sunk.
That's correct. But of course, what they say is that some of these medications can actually be good for you in terms of you may have certain things, certain mental routines that are destructive and that aren't good for you that can be interdicted by psychedelics, for example.
What's your take on it?
My take is that could very well be true. You know, the psychedelics could open up a gap between your temporal consciousness and your non-terminal consciousness, right? Your mind it's an extended, stratified thing. We're just using our terminal consciousness right now, but there are other aspects to your consciousness. You can actually get, you know, certain kinds of insights and communications if you just open up a gap. You understand? And let them come in and fill the gap, and then, you know, you can see them as they would ordinarily.
So the things that people see when they're on psychedelics, I usually write them off and I tell people, you know, you're just hallucinating. But you're saying maybe that's not all it is. They might be seeing something real.
Well, once again, what is reality? Is reality just stuff out there? No. Reality has a mental aspect.
Yep.
Right? And once you admit that basically everything has a mental aspect, then of course what's going on in your mind is real. It takes on a kind of reality. It's not the same as physical reality. It is nevertheless real.
Are angels and demons real?
Yes. Yes.
I think so too. Is there a fear that if you take some of these drugs, you might be letting in the wrong guys?
That's a problem, isn't it? And that's a problem that I think a lot of people have encountered. You have to be a certain kind of person to be able to handle these drugs and not be sucked under by them, okay? Because once your mind is, you know, is messed with in that way, something else, you know, it's weakened, you know, you're not exactly in control anymore, something else can come in and grab it. And if you open up that gap that I was talking about, what can come into that gap might not be good for you.
God is real, angels are real, demons are real. Is the devil real?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, it has to be. You know, we were talking about Michael Knowles being surrounded by the medium and, you know, you've got a boundary. Yeah. Well, God has a boundary too. He's got a very tight boundary. He's perfect. He can't take anything resembling imperfection, right? He can't take it into himself because that would be a contradiction.
Yep.
Okay, so God needs an antithesis in order to be properly defined. What is that antithesis? Anti-God, or Satan. So it definitely exists. Now, Satan isn't coherent because, you know, he basically hates existence. Nevertheless, he gains coherence through human beings, through secondary tellers, as they're called in the CTMU. In other words, Satan can nucleate power structures, for example, you know, things like corporations and governments, where you've got people in there that can be acquired as resources, and there's a kind of skeleton, you know, a corporate organization, a governmental, you know, organization that's holding them together, holding them in place, that can be exploited by Satan.
So you're not describing Manichaeism. You're not saying there's God and then the opposite of God and there's some maybe equivalence between the two. You're saying that God, obviously there is an antithesis. Christ has an antichrist, but that it's incoherent. And are you saying that he sort of that the devil sort of lacks substance, or that's why he needs the humans?
I'm saying the devil lacks coherence. Coherence is what brings everything into superposition, right, with itself. In other words, it allows something to, this is going to sound a little bit paradoxical, allows something to communicate non-locally with itself, right? All of its possible states are in superposition. They exist all at once, okay? And this is pretty much inescapable.
I'm reminded of a writer, René Girard, who had this idea that the devil, being who he is a kind of contradiction of being. And it seems to me what Girard says is something similar to what you're saying, which is that he requires us to kind of do his dirty work.
That is correct. Yeah. We give existence to the devil, to Satan. Now, you have to make a distinction, however, between Satan and Lucifer, for example. Now, Lucifer is an angel. Okay, that's what he's supposed to be. He's a fallen angel,
right?
You know, but nevertheless, an angel, right? The angel of light, okay, the morning star, whatever you want to call him, okay? That is not Satan. Those are two different things.
What's the difference?
This would no doubt be classified as a heresy, for example, in the church.
I did not bring the Inquisition with me yet. They're not behind the curtains here. So what is your idea then? Because traditionally, it's understood that Satan and Lucifer are the same person. You're saying they're different.
Yes.
Person.
How are they different?
Well, Lucifer walks the fence. Basically, he's the angel of light. What does light do? Basically, light is what brings reality to us. Okay? He's walking the fence between good and evil. We're all in the same boat. We all walk the fence between good and evil. Okay? How can we do that? Okay? Well, through Lucifer. Yeah.
And the grace of God.
Through Lucifer. Basically, Lucifer has been exiled here because God won't tolerate the imperfections of this place, okay? He has Lucifer handle that for him. And that's why Lucifer is what he is. That's how he fell down here to earth, okay? He's performing a function here. That function is light. I mean, I don't know, do you follow what I'm...
I do. I'm still trying to parse the difference a little. If Christ says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, is he describing Satan here, or he's describing Lucifer? Or both?
If Christ were here and I could hear his exact words, I could perfectly interpret them.
Right, okay. Yeah.
But it's very hard to do that, 2,000 years after the fact, right? With all the different translations and interpretations that the Bible has undergone, okay?
And
so what I like to do is I like to approach it from first principles and look at it logically, right, rationally. And what does logic tell us, if anything, okay? Well, logic tells us that basically God needs a negation, but that negation is too incoherent to function in this world except through human beings.
Right.
What's the rest of it? What's the rest of it all about?
Yeah.
And Lucifer is a concept that is better suited than Satan to that purpose.
I love this point that he's incoherent, that the old devil is incoherent. That I read some poem, I think it's a modern poem, that says, sin is a big problem because it's evil. But it's also a big problem because it's such a waste of time. It's so incoherent. When you think of when you take the suffering out of it, and you just think of people committing any particular sin, it just doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, the sense that it makes to them is they're enjoying it. They're hedonistically deriving pleasure from the sin. And of course, we all, have the same pleasure mechanisms.
Yeah.
So we're all tempted to commit sin, but we've got to keep a lid on it. There have to be limits. Okay, and what I'm worried about is that now Satan controls the world, and there are certain people involved in running things who don't have those limits.
Well,
they're so rich, they're so powerful that they don't need those limits anymore. So they've more or less thrown them off.
Now, there's nothing new to the idea that Satan or Lucifer, or let's call him just the old devil himself, is the prince of this world, and that the rich and the powerful they do his bidding, and they're bad people, and they follow their lowest appetites and their pleasures, and they can be sadistic. And so that's been going on for a long time. Is there something particular about the moment we're living in that says it's actually gotten much worse?
Yes, that is, we've had so many technological advancements that now the technology of surveillance and coercion are such, and these people are so rich, they're like black holes gravitating all the money to themselves, that they're unstoppable, okay? And because they're unstoppable, because they actually run everything, okay, we are endangered by them now.
It sounds to me like you're saying we don't live in Schoolhouse Rock, I'm a bill up on Capitol Hill. We're not living in the republic that a lot of us say that we're living in.
That's correct. We're ruled, basically, the world is globalistic now. It's run by globalists. That's their goal. I mean, that's what global means. We're going global.
It's oligarchic.
Huh?
And it would therefore be oligarchic. What you're describing.
That's absolutely correct. Oligarchic, because very few of them actually exist.
And this is beyond, a U.S. senator. This is beyond the structures.
Those are puppets. It's fairly common knowledge now, I suppose, that I regard most politicians as being one step removed from prostitutes.
Yeah.
Right?
That's been true for
and that's not
two oldest
universal.
professions.
There are, a few exceptions, but let me tell you, they're on the run.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a very serious situation, right? And if you take a look at these globalists, the ones that have thrown off all the limits and they're fantastically rich and powerful now, and you take a look at what they actually have upstairs, I'm afraid it's not very impressive.
Right.
Okay? I mean, if you really look at their intellectual production, Soros might be the best of them.
Yeah.
He's at least got a theory of economics, It's flawed, but, he at least has that. The rest of them are just a bunch of Sybarites.
What about, I guess even outside of banking or finance per se, what about someone like Bill Gates? That guy's everywhere. He seems to be, I don't know, why is he an expert on healthcare? I don't know, but my television tells me that he is. Why is he So someone like that, but he's a smart guy. He's got to be, right?
Oh, he's not stupid. Bill Gates is, he's got a respectable intellect, but there's something misfiring there, okay? Bill is very concerned with overpopulation, and we do have an overpopulation problem.
So then this brings me to, I asked friends of mine, I said, speaking to Chris Langan, send in your questions. And most of the questions were about metaphysics and God and the CTMU and all of your thoughts on all those things. But one friend of mine, he said, you know, I want you to ask him about Bitcoin. I want you to ask him about money and if there's any way to break the government or super government control of money. What do you think of, if I want to start my own currency, I guess I could, I'd call it Michael Coin. Is this one way to push back against an increasingly technocratic global form of government?
Yes, there is, but it has to start at the local level. You're not going to print your own world currency to compete head-to-head with these. You've got to go, you know, basically attend a few city council meetings. You've got to go in there, you know, say your piece, say we've got a problem, you know, basically the world is run by globalism. This is America. You know, we should have our right of self-determination here, but that's being taken away from us. See who, you know, agrees with you about it. You know, I mean, somebody will probably come up to you after your speech and say, you know, I agree with you 100%. Then you start, you find out who those people are, you get together, and you start putting pressure on your local politicians.
Are you saying the situation is so bad politically that actually, you know, people will call you a radical and an extremist and a terrorist for something like this. But are you saying basically, Jefferson, we need to go fight another revolution or something? Or is there?
I would just as soon see this whole thing resolved non-violently. Of course, I want peace on earth. I want everybody to feel as though we're in fellowship with each other, the brotherhood of man. You know what I'm talking about. That is the right way to do it.
When you or I or Donald Trump, for that matter, use the word globalism, what the liberal establishment says is, oh, that's either they'll say globalism is good and we should have more of it, or they'll say that's a crazy conspiracy theory, there's no such thing as globalism.
What?
I could point to a lot of international organizations that increasingly try to take power away from national government.
Well, what are intelligence agencies? What are trade secrets? What's intellectual property? They're all conspiracies.
Right.
Okay? People trying to get ahead by lying by omission or relying directly to other people, the competition, right? That's what it is. You can't get away from conspiracy. It's how the world works. As a matter of fact, it's game theoretically rational.
So you're saying not conspiracy theory, you're saying just flat out conspiracy.
That's what makes the world go around, I'm afraid, you know? And, but of course, you know, the elite themselves realize this. They know that that's how the world works. They just want to distract you.
Well, that's such a great way to put it, where you say a trade secret, or just a group of people come together. They say, I've got this good idea for a company, and we're going to come together and do that, and we're not going to let the competition know about it. We're going to start this, and we're going to hopefully it'll be successful and we'll make some money. And that is a form of conspiracy.
WF and their Young Global Leader program, you know, Young Global Leaders. I mean, everybody's a young global leader, right? I mean, Trudeau, Macron, Merkel, Putin. You know, and for the Putin deals, that very much surprised me, but Klaus Schwab is on record. He's on video, in fact, you know, claiming that Vlad Putin is one of his young global leaders, trained in globalism.
You know, it's funny you mention that, the young wing of the World Economic Forum. When I was a freshman in college, you get all of these opportunities for internships and fellowships, and you get a grant, and you try to get a grant, so you apply to these things. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about any of these groups. And so I said, I'm a politically minded young man, very conservative, so it made me very different than my classmates.
Right.
And one of the opportunities that came across was the World Economic Forum Global Change Makers Fellowship.
You were invited to be a part of this?
No, I applied. What did I?
You actually applied?
I applied, and I said, they said,
shame on you.
Well, I didn't know what it was, so I said, what's the experience? I said, well, I'm very involved in this conservative group and this right-wing group and this.
Good way to get ahead. I got to give you that.
Well, but I'll tell you, I thought I had a good resume. It wasn't like my classmates, which was they had all their liberal groups. So I said, I'm a conservative. So, but you probably want some conservatives here, right? And so I apply, and you know, you're going to be shocked to hear this, Chris. I didn't hear back. They didn't take me.
Yeah, I'm absolutely flabbergasted.
And my liberal classmates, who I felt had a weaker application, but they were all part of the liberal groups,
yes,
they did get it. I guess it makes sense now that I know what the World Economic Forum.
What is socialism? I mean, what is communism, right? These things were actually funded. They're more or less invented by the central bank. You know, who funded, you know, originally was paying Marx and Engels, and before that, Moses Hess and other people to come up with, you know, it's a strategy for world domination, and has been for the last 200 years. What has changed?
So when someone like Trump comes along and he says, I'm not going to fight this political battle along exactly left-right lines or Republican-Democrat, but I'm saying I'm going to stand for the American nation and nationalism generally against globalism. But he managed to get through. He did get elected.
Yes, he did.
Were you a Trump supporter? You don't need to say if you don't want to.
As a matter of fact, back when people were saying Trump can't read, look at the way he hesitates. You know, he can't. He's got trouble with the teleprompter. The guy can't read. I actually stood up and I said no. I said I've met Donald Trump and I think his IQ is probably equal to that of the average Harvard professor.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually stood up for. Of course, I never got anything out of it, but I thought I was doing. You know,
you just said it because
telling people that basically he is competent. He's a good businessman. You know, and therefore could be good for the country, and I wanted people to understand that.
So how did this guy, and I've asked this to my friends, and I said, how did this guy, who I think was basically on the level and really did at least try to pose a stopping block to the globalism program, how did he ever get elected? How'd they let him through?
Well, he was a little bit of a wild card. Right? Trump is not as easily controlled as some of them are. So he stood up there and he spoke his mind. He's got good instincts in that respect because what he said resonates with what is in the minds of a lot of American citizens. We want to have our own country. We want America to have first. We don't want our borders to be open. We don't want millions of third world migrants coming here every year and displacing us from our own territory. I mean, and Trump actually, he did a good job of enunciating that. That's how he got elected. Okay? And the first time around, you know, they weren't prepared. You know, so they couldn't do anything about it the second time around. Yeah.
Are you suggesting, Chris, that there were some questions about the 2020 presidential election?
Anyone who doesn't understand that election was, shall we say, not quite up to snuff, is some kind of moron.
Because I was told by all the fact checkers and all the social media censors that if I raised any question, I said, you know, it seems like they kind of violated the law in Pennsylvania, and it seems like actually they kind of extended the voting periods. They said that's crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. How dare you?
Well, that's exactly what they do. You see, you've violated groupthink, so you're out. Your opinion means nothing.
How would you describe your politics? Populist, conservative?
I was always pretty much of an independent. When I was a kid, I was basically a Democrat, working, you know, I mean, my family was Democratic, you know, it was, I think my stepfather was you ever hear of the Wobblies?
Yeah.
He was an organizer for the Wobblies out of Chicago. Okay, and so always I was raised around this liberal attitude. So yeah, we were Democrats, and I thought, okay, yeah, the working man, the people that actually hold this country together, that keep everything moving, you know, those are the ones that we should really care about. And you know, if we're not careful, the rich will walk all over them. So they need, you know, somebody to defend them and to take care of them. And you know, I'm one of those people. I wasn't rich, you know, my family had no money at all.
Yeah.
So naturally I gravitated to that. Then the Democratic Party changed. Okay, no longer was it about the working man. Suddenly it was full of like these billionaire techies that have never done an honest day's labor in their entire miserable lives. Okay, and I realized, wait a minute, things have changed here.
Yeah.
There is no more Democratic Party of the kind that I used to know about, okay, that I used to belong to. And that's when I became a conservative. And a conservative in a stronger sense than most people who call themselves conservatives today, because they're really just cuckolded by the liberals. No, they're afraid to say boo to them. I mean, look.
Well, you know, it's funny. Now, I was told some years ago, this was probably 2016, 2017, someone said, Michael, you can't use the word cuckold as an insult because that's racist or sexist. And I said, look, I'm of Italian extraction. Cuckold is the oldest insult in the Italian culture. That, you know, even
the Sicilians have a gesture for that.
Yes, and it's the rock star gesture. I think I forget the name of the rock star, also Sicilian, who popularized it. and a very famous one. I can't believe his name escapes me. But that sign, it's the symbol of the cuckold. I said, there's nothing wrong about you. It's a very funny insult, and it's descriptive as a matter of fact.
Apparently, some married couple. Apparently, there are married couples that actually that's their hobby.
right.
I can't see it myself, but
not my thing. Right, but and it's obviously it's disordered. Nobody wants, I don't think rationally anyone would say that's a good way to live your life. And what you're saying is that there are people who call themselves conservatives, and really they're just squish, cuckolded, or they just give in.
It's a figure of speech.
Yeah.
We're not accusing them of literal cuckoldry.
No, they might be. I don't know. I'm not in the bedroom.
But basically, they are letting the other party wear the pants.
Yeah.
And they're putting on their little panties.
Yeah.
And doing whatever they're told. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what kind of that's the modern rhino, the modern Republican. That's what most of them are. And believe you me, most of them wouldn't do a damn thing for anybody else.
Right.
They're basically into their own thing, their own self-interest, and they just never take any risks on behalf of the American people anymore. And that offends me, because we're paying them, and they've promised to represent our interests, and they're not doing it.
Well, you look at really basic issues, something like immigration. Well, and Trump really won on the immigration issue. Something like immigration, this is no insult to anyone around the world who wants to come to the United States. Frankly, it's not even an insult to the illegal aliens who are pouring across the border. But I think anyone can agree, taking in 1 million legal immigrants and 2 million illegal immigrants annually, it's going to be more than that this year probably, on top of that, 3 million people per year.
Checking them in? Whose houses are they living in?
You're
See
right.
them living in anybody from Washington, D.C.'s house?
No, it's not Martha's Vineyard. It's not
No,
Southampton.
You don't see too many of them there.
No. But it's a political strategy that is opposed. If you look at public opinion polls, the vast majority of Americans, including lots and lots of Democrats, want to drastically reduce this immigration issue. And yet, doesn't matter which party gets elected, the border remains open. The West, especially after World War II, you've got this huge boom in the West. You've got the second half of the 20th century. Now we're into the 21st century. That's where all the money is. That's where all the opportunity is. And so just naturally, people want to flood in there. And if you've got relatively lax immigration policies.
Well, we used to have, in order to get into this country, you used to have to prove that you were of value, that you could offer it something. It wasn't just about us giving to you. If you were an immigrant and you wanted to come here, you had to show that you had something to offer yourself. Okay? You had to, learn English. You had to go through Ellis Island or wherever. You had to learn English. You had to learn about the Constitution. You had to buy in to our political.
But now it seems you're incentivized to hate America, or to hate Western civilization.
That's right. And now who would be doing that? Any real American? Not that I know of. Okay, it's a contradiction in terms.
So what's the end game here? I mean, if America
The end game is world domination. They're going global. That's what it's all about.
So if we've got this oligarchic group, this self-appointed oligarchic group, that I, in my naivete in freshman year of college, I say, oh, the World Economic Forum, or what, forget even WEF. There are other international organizations, the United Nations, obviously, the European Union, which the Brits have pulled themselves out of. But there are these groups throughout the West that want to erase national borders, essentially.
That's correct. And they want to deracinate everybody that lives inside.
And yes, erase culture. I say this as the relatively mocha-skinned Southern Italian here. But there is a sense that no, there is no. We don't want to even just look at Europe. We don't want there to be French culture and German culture and British culture.
I know, what a tragedy that is. Look at those cultures, they're beautiful.
All the most beautiful cultures in the world, and the French. And the French on top of all those beautiful cultures too, yeah, right.
You know what the Brits always say, right? France is much too good for the French.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So then what is your thought? Moving forward, we're in this very bad political spot right now. It would seem to me we've been in bad spots before. Tower of Babel didn't seem particularly pleasant. The solution to that didn't seem particularly pleasant to live with either.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what happens now? Do we just need to field a good candidate, or no? It's too far gone.
The political system is kind of shot. Okay, so I'm afraid it's going to take some activism. We're going to have to look, I don't want anything violent to happen. I don't want a new revolution, but I will tell you this, that if people don't act as though they are willing to fight for their own rights, they're going to lose those rights. Founding fathers knew it. You know, it's written right into the Constitution. Okay, if we don't fight for our rights, we're going to lose them. Simple as that.
You mentioned everyone getting stuck with the Fauci ouchie for the last 2 years, and you know it's so extremely effective that we all need to take 55 boosters just to marvel at the perfection and efficacy of it. Are you anti-vaccine generally? I take it you're anti-COVID.
Well, I bought into the COVID thing at first, and I went out and bought, Gina and I bought, gas masks for us, and those N100 masks. And, and I advised people what to do so as not to get infected with the deadly COVID. And then I noticed that it wasn't really killing. I live in northern Missouri. Nobody up there was wearing masks. Nobody up there, and nobody was dying of COVID-19. So I realized, well, there's got to be something a little bit off about this, right? And so I, kind of started getting away from it. And then I noticed that, then I noticed that it was being used as a pretext for something called the Great Reset.
And again, to bring back the World Economic Forum, this is a page on the WEF website. It's the Great Reset of the global economies and the global political order.
Right. They're very open about it. Okay. And there have been, white papers written in the past about using just this methodology to get, everybody behind the globalist agenda. Right? Operation, Warp Speed was part of that, And
so then does Trump bear some responsibility for giving Fauci the microphone?
He definitely bears responsibility. My question is, does he really know what's going on, or has he surrounded himself with people that are misleading him about what's going on? I would like to believe that Donald Trump has been misled. But if he knows how much damage those so-called vaccines have actually caused, and he's still pushing them, then we have a problem.
If you raise any questions about even the COVID vaccines, which don't do, at the very least, they don't do what Biden and Fauci and Walensky told us they would do, namely to stop you from contracting the virus or spreading it to others. At the very least, it doesn't do that. You're called a crazy anti-vaxxer.
Well, that's called cognitive dissonance. Right. I mean, who's crazy? If you can look at the reality of what is happening and you can deny it and call anyone who believes in it a conspiracy theorist, what kind of person are you? Well, you're obviously a nut job, a kook, a moron. You're something like that, right? That's what all these people are. As I say, conspiracy makes the world go round, okay?
Now, beyond finance or beyond these NGOs, you mentioned the intelligence agencies. Something that occurs to me is if I were working at an intelligence agency, they never invited me, never got that invite on ZipRecruiter.
Perhaps you should consider yourself lucky.
I think I do. I certainly do. But if I were at an intelligence agency and I heard there was a guy with the highest IQ ever recorded who was contradicting the liberal establishment agenda, I'd probably have a file on that guy.
Be careful.
Have you had any run-ins with the...
Some interest has been shown. It was oblique. They're very, let's just put it this way. I managed to, meet, a couple, 3 people that are involved in that line of work when there was no actual reason that should have happened. In other words, but they're very cagey about it. If they want to recruit you, they'll probably do it obliquely. If you don't apply to actually join an intelligence service, but they're interested in you, they will try to get you involved with someone who they control. And then he will then vector you around and put you in touch with the right people. But you've got to accept the agenda sight unseen before that happens, right? You've more or less got to let them know that, okay, no matter what they're actually planning to do, I'm going to go along with it because I really, really want to be in the CIA or the Defense Intelligence Agency or the NSA or whatever, right?
No such agency, as we used to call it. There's no such agency.
I like that. Yeah, but you have to somehow display some sort of willingness before you will be directly approached by them, okay? And I guess I never displayed that kind of willingness. So I'm not I'm not there. I'm not in the intelligence community. I am, periodically in touch with people who are in the intelligence community, in various email distributions and things like that, but that's it.
Since we're already in it, there are going to be people out there who say, this guy is talking about every conspiracy theory I ever heard in the whole book. Since we're already in it, to take a slightly different tack, but still within the realm of what Wikipedia is going to call it, conspiracy theories, do you believe in aliens?
Well, I will say this, the intelligence community, large sectors of it believe in aliens.
Really?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's a big, they're constantly discussing these things. Yes. And if you look at the global elite, and you wonder, well, I don't want to blame the world banksters for this, that's a conspiracy theory. Then who is pulling all those strings? Okay? Could there be another kind of entity, aliens, demons, whatever? Could there be something that's pulling their strings that the global banksters know about, right, and they're taking orders from, but they're being totally concealed and hidden from the public? This is a viable hypothesis, and it's one that the intelligence communities don't reject.
It's funny you pose
but which is, kind of neither here nor there, because the intelligence communities themselves could be run by aliens, for all we know.
People are going to be laughing when you say that there are aliens
let them laugh, okay? But they won't be able to come up with any supporting argument against what I'm saying. They don't know enough.
Well,
they're ignorant.
It's funny that you mention aliens and demons in the same breath, because I don't particularly believe in aliens. I mean, what do I know? There are a lot of things I don't know about. But I certainly believe that demons exist. I'm pretty confident that demons exist. I'm less confident that aliens exist.
Well, but the thing is, a lot of people are reporting that they're seeing these UFOs and other strange alien-suggested phenomena.
So what is something like, they call it the tic-tac, of these weird UFOs that seem to violate the laws of physics?
Correct. Basically, they look like, little blobs of light or spheres that can commit these maneuvers that are totally against the laws of physics as we understand them, right? They look like they have mass, but somehow they're not subject to inertia. They can turn on a dime on a right angle and continue at the same speed. They can accelerate at, a tremendous, with tremendous G forces. Okay, how can that happen?
Do you have any theory?
Well, yes, I do. But it's it's fairly involved. Basically, when you reduce the world to telesis, and you understand that reality consists of a merging of mind and matter. It's an interplay, of the two.
It's not just stuff, and it's not just pure abstraction.
It can be real without necessarily being a completely physical phenomenon. Okay? In other words, there can be a mental component to it. Right? And that is what I think is happening here. I think that actually there's something to it. The number of people that report UFO incidents is simply too large. People aren't, they're not all liars. They don't run around risking their reputations by saying, okay, I'm going to make a nut out of myself and say, these UFOs exist.
But couldn't they just be nuts?
Well, I suppose they could.
But you're saying it's
I'm saying it's very improbable that they are. Because not that many people are that nutty.
Well, my friend Andrew Klavan, who you met earlier, he has this party trick, which is he's a mystery writer, and he has written ghost stories and things. And at dinner parties, he'll say, hey, I'll ask a random person, I'll say, hey, have you ever seen a ghost? And he says a lot of the time, people will say yes. And throughout history, people report having seen a ghost.
That is correct.
And he says, too many people are saying they've seen a ghost for there not to be ghosts, or something like a ghost.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
I've seen things that look like ghosts. No.
Such as?
I have. I've seen things that look like UFOs, too. They're there. If you're not a very observant person, you'll never see anything like that. If your mind is completely closed and you just screen all that stuff out, you'll never see anything like that. But if you're an open-minded person and you're observant, you will see things like that eventually. Okay?
I don't want to put you on the spot to give an example, because sometimes if I describe an experience that I would call religious or numinous, sometimes people say, well, describe it. I say, I can go around the edges, but it's somewhat ineffable. Could you describe such an experience?
Well, yes, I could describe such an experience. Okay. Well, on the UFO thing, I was working for the Forest Service near Lewiston, Montana, in the Lewis and Clark National Forest. Not too far from Malmstrom Air Force Base. And I was in charge of a mountain range called the Little Snowies. Okay, I was the fire guard, the regional fire guard for that area. And I was alone up there. There were campgrounds, and I'd go up and tend to the campgrounds and make sure that they were all cleaned up and everything, and that was one of my duties. And I had to be a fire guard, which means putting out forest spotting and putting out forest fires and things like that. One day I was up there in a Forest Service pickup truck at a certain campground, and I was there, and suddenly I look up, and I say suddenly, it was just in the skies. I became aware that it was up there, and I looked up. There's this huge spheroidal, but elliptical, not a perfect spheroid, like a saucer that was turned partially on its side.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that must be one of those, lenticular clouds that I've heard of. So I looked at it and I figured, okay, now I wonder how this evolves in time. Totally changeless. I actually took sticks and I tried to use parallax to figure out, what is this thing? Why isn't it changing? Why isn't it moving? Why is it completely featureless and metallic looking? Well, it wasn't any lenticular cloud, okay? And I literally stared at it for a long, long time before I finally just got, okay, it's there, got back in my pickup and drove away.
Did you call it in or anything?
Well, I've told a number of people about it. Yeah, I didn't call it in, no. It was irrelevant to the state of my campgrounds,
It's funny you mention because sometimes people say, this is a little different than seeing a UFO, but somewhat related. People will say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Christianity because I don't believe in miracles. If miracles really happened, we'd all know about it. And if you look at the gospel accounts of miracles happening, the wildest part of it is not the miracle happening. It's the fact that when the miracle happens, everyone treats it as this miraculous event, and then 5 seconds later they move on, and people treat it as totally ordinary. And this happens again and again and again. It's even happened. I would say that I've experienced things that are miraculous.
Yes.
And even in my own life, not 1 week later, I'm just going about my business as though it never happened. Or I'll forget that it happened. It was a miracle, shouldn't that?
Right, but you don't deny that they happened.
No.
Right.
No, I don't.
That's the important thing. Because then you're really nuts.
Yeah. when you deny that it happened,
That's
right? Because you're so beholden to some preconceived notion of the way things
That's
are.
correct. So who are the real nuts? Obviously, they're the people that are doing all the talk about the alien conspiracy theories. Okay? There's obviously something there, or the number of people that report them wouldn't be reporting them. There are people in the CIA who actually claim to have been abducted. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but they're there. Okay? And we're not talking about small individuals. We're not talking about low-ranking individuals. We're talking about high-ranking individuals.
These people, not just that you've read a book about, you're saying these people you've talked to. Or
people that there was one of them in particular that I was actually, somebody that I knew was trying to arrange an introduction to this person. And I said, well, okay, so he's in the, CIA. Is he going to tell me the truth? I'm not in the CIA. Is he going to tell me the truth about anything? Well, no, actually what he wants to talk about is abductions because, he and his wife were actually abducted by aliens and he wants to talk to you about it. And I said, well, is he going to tell me the truth about anything? Well, I don't know. I said, then I don't want to talk to him. Okay, I don't want to talk to him at all. There has to be some kind of understanding that I'm not going to get lied to, otherwise I'm wasting my time, because I'll never know whether he's lying or telling the truth. So if somebody isn't going to commit up front to telling me the truth, I don't have time for him.
If he were a really smart liar, he would have just said, I will tell you the truth, and lied even if he wanted to.
I suppose so.
So
I mean, that's what they do in the CIA.
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
right. It's sort of the job, right? If you're a spy, that's
correct. And you lie your ass off at every available opportunity about everything.
Right. Right.
Okay. They don't all do that. I think there are a couple of people that I sort of trust when they talk about certain subjects. But, by no means are they entirely in the know even. I mean, if you're in the CIA, you're basically a bureaucrat.
Right. Right.
You look up, you see, okay, well, we I've got my superior, and then I'm looking up farther. Now I see the director of the CIA. Who's giving that guy his orders? It ain't the president. I mean, that's suddenly you're in a void. Who's running things? Okay, as far as most of these guys are concerned, it could be the devil himself that's running things. They just don't know.
You know, it's so amazing that you say that, because it takes it full circle to the point that when I hear, okay, this so-and-so is actually really beholden to so-and-so, and this person is actually beholden to this person, and I know that that's a fact because you can just see it in politics. You can kind of go to an org chart and kind of point to it, right? But then eventually say, and so-and-so, if in a really powerful position, they're actually responsible to so-and-so and accountable to, and you think, okay, at a certain point you think, I don't know, I have no way of verifying this could be it. And then when you go all the way back to, and so-and-so is really just answering to the devil, now you've got me again. Because I read that in my Bible. I know that that's true. I know that, he's the prince of this world.
Well, yes, and they've been, by the way, I mean, there are accounts from biblical times and pre-biblical times that involve UFOs, things in the sky, that show up during critical battles, for example, and turn the tide, right? This goes all the way back, to the Vedic religion, the pre-Hindu religion. There are all kinds of people who have reported these things. And they end up in various religious scriptures, including Christian scriptures as well, in some cases. So
I can't think of an example of an extraterrestrial appearance.
Well, no, they're basically attributed to God. These are the interventions of angels or something.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You can go back. You look at the Mayans and the Incas and people like that. There are also, there are pictures on temple walls, right? There are carvings that seem to suggest that these things actually exist.
Well,
or at least were perceived.
Right. No, there's a great meme that I'm really taken with. It actually has to do with IQ, which is a nice coincidence. But I love this meme because it's got the really stupid guy at the one end of the bell curve, and he's sort of drooling, and he says, duh, all the bad stuff is because of the devil, right? And then you get up on the bell curve into, I don't know, say IQ of 120 or 130, and it's the really smart guy, the egghead with the glasses, and he says,
well, that's just the start of the danger zone.
Yeah, the danger zone is when you're just smart enough, but not smart. And those guys, they say, no, actually, the devil doesn't exist, and actually, we're all just sort of bags of chemicals, and no, it's all rationally explainable, and blah, 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 blah. And then you get up to the guy at the really high end of the IQ curve in this meme, and he says, no, actually, the bad stuff's just from the devil. And he agrees with the guy at the other end of the but it strikes me that there's really something to that. Roger Scruton, the late conservative philosopher, he said that the job of the conservative intellectual is to articulate things that the common man knows intuitively.
That's right.
And it's especially interesting when it comes to you, because you're a guy at the very highest end of the intelligence spectrum, and you've lived the life of a blue-collar guy.
That's right. I wanted meaning in my life. It's like I say, I wanted meaning above all things. You got to make sure, that you decide up front when you're a young man, if you want to accomplish anything, who do you serve? Truth or mammon? Okay, you don't have a choice. You do have a choice, but you can't do both at once. Okay, it's either going to be truth, which is the same as God. I mean, truth and God are to some extent synonymous.
Yeah.
Or
good, the true, and beautiful.
Or it's going to be money. And if you choose money, if you choose mammon, then you're going to be serving mammon, who happens to be the globalists at this point, because they control all the wealth and power.
So you mention, I think we totally agree, Marxism is a very terrible ideology that's caused a lot of suffering in the world. You would agree with that?
I'm not wasting this cigar.
Absolutely not. No, take your time, please. But so we would agree with that. We're pretty anti-Marxist, yes.
Well, I'm very anti-Marxist. It's a terrible philosophy.
Yes.
I mean, it's as full of holes as you can imagine.
Even though all the geniuses at Princeton or whatever, there's all these Marxists.
Look, that's a club, If you don't have the key to the clubhouse, you're not getting in, okay? They won't even talk to you.
Yeah.
No academic will take me on, will actually start arguing, even in his own field at this point, because they know they're going to lose, and they will. Any academic, any time.
But now, yes, I mean, I'm as anti-higher education cartel as there can be.
Right, they're indoctrination mills. You have to look at the entire educational system as being one great big indoctrination factory.
Yeah.
And the people that work in it, those faculty members, they're chosen, they're selected as indoctrinators of the youth.
Yes, and they peddle Marxism, but what I like what you just said. I mean, you boiled it down even more simply. You know, a lot of politics comes down to, you know, well, you're a socialist, I'm anti-socialist. Well, yeah, I'm very anti-socialist, and well, you're a capitalist or this or that. But you seem to be raising some problems with capitalism too. Man cannot serve two masters.
Well, there are two kinds of capitalism. One of them is laissez-faire capitalism. Then you're supporting your family, you're trying to get ahead, you're trying to enjoy a good and comfortable life, but you're not forgetting about God while you do it. Then you've got monopoly capitalism. And this is what libertarians and other people sometimes forget, that laissez-faire capitalism, because money gravitates, it's like a black hole, takes money to make money.
Right.
You got to have a bunch. Once you have a bunch of it, it comes more and more easily to you. Yeah, I think you're out of butane there.
I know. Let me see if I can will. There we go. Hey, how about that? Not quite miraculous, but good. So monopoly capitalism is the sort of thing we call crony capitalism, crooked capitalism, but it's...
But basically, you're not just controlling the supply side, you're controlling the markets, okay? You're told what you can buy. Well, we've decided that everybody should be using electric cars. We're not going to sell the other kind anymore.
Right.
Okay, that's monopoly capitalism, and because if you control the manufacturing, the industry, right? If you're a trade organization or a trade association, and you control that industry, you can literally control the market. You can only buy what you have the opportunity to buy, what they're giving you the opportunity to buy. And these days, they're only giving you what they want you to have. Those are the only choices you have as a consumer.
They're doing this with light bulbs too, and it drives me nuts. They tried to do it 10 years ago. They are trying to ban incandescent light bulbs, which I find to be much more beautiful than those ugly LED or any of the other light bulbs. I just, in my home, I just find it warmer and more beautiful to have, and they are trying to outlaw them.
Well, my wife agrees with you.
Really?
Well, we have, you know, those old style incandescent bulbs in the bedroom, for example.
Yeah, I think of my Christmas tree. I don't want those little LEDs. They're harsh, they're ugly, they're blue. I want the warmer light. And yet,
well, exactly. But they do make LEDs, by the way, in almost all frequencies these days.
Really? Okay.
So you can get daylight LEDs.
Okay. That's a compromise.
Costly though. I mean, they're way more expensive than an incandescent bulb.
So this actually raises even a different question here. We've talked about truth. We've talked about goodness. There's one more transcendental. Beauty.
Correct.
Where does beauty factor into your thoughts about everything?
Well, now here we get, you know, into the CTMU. We all know about the monetary economy, right? You get money, you buy things, you know, you increase your wealth. The economy is actually telic. It's a vast favor bank. I do for you, you do for me. This is actually the trading system that exists in nature.
Can you define the word telic?
Yes, telesis means it's a fundamental, it's the mnemonic substance of which everything else is composed.
Okay.
Okay? In other words,
I think I've
some people, a physicist says, well, that's energy. Energy is the basic substance of which everything is mass energy, right? I'm saying, no, you've got to go up a step. You need something more general with other properties that, for instance, accommodate information.
Okay.
You need something more general than energy to explain that. Or if you want to, you can play a little semantic game and then gradually expand the definition of energy so that it takes everything in, right? But I call the ultimate extension of that telesis.
Okay.
Basically, it's a fundamental form of intentionality. And if you want to talk about the intentionality of God, then you're talking about a dirty word in academia. And what is that? Teleology. Okay? The will of God.
Right.
Yeah.
That things have a purpose.
That's correct.
Yes. And so you're saying that there is this telic aspect to the economy too. We're not just...
That is fundamentally the only aspect, okay? Money is an abstraction of that. It's a very specified, controllable, physically commoditized version of telesis, okay? And you have a certain, you know, group, a certain crowd that has established a monopoly on that. Now, when you establish a monopoly on money, you're actually monopolizing the telic economy as well. How? People invest their telesis in what can make them money, okay? Right. Unless you're like me and you prefer meaning in your life, okay? Truth, all right? That's what telesis is. It encompasses not just money, but truth and meaning.
That the way that money and the monetary economy is manipulated will take into it many more aspects of life that, and maybe steer them the wrong way. I'll try to bring it to earth, at least in the way I was thinking about it, which is I hate modern buildings. I hate them. They're so ugly.
Drab and Soviet style.
They are, and they bring me down. And I walk into Grand Central, a nice old building in New York, and I feel like a king, and I feel dignified, and I feel like a full human being. And then I walk into that. They've actually recently tried to make it better, but...
Imagine how you'd have felt in the Notre Dame Cathedral before they burned it down.
Which I never got to see. I never got to go in.
Me neither.
So what is that experience like? I wonder, for someone who's just got just this perhaps quirk of birth where you just have this extraordinarily high IQ, what is the experience of life? Is it kind of funny and amusing, or is it extremely annoying?
Well, somebody, got a little charge out of it, got a little amusement out of it, because I sure as hell didn't most of the time. But I don't complain. This is God's world. God gave me my lot. Knew that I was going to go after meaning instead of money, and everything that came after was more or less like clockwork.
If you had any say in the matter, which you don't, and which you certainly did not, would you choose to be born very intelligent, or of middling intelligence, or of low intelligence?
What do you think the answer is? I wouldn't trade my mind for anyone else's. Nobody. Okay? Simply because I understand what the difference is now. You lose if you're not intelligent, you don't cultivate your intelligence and make the most of it, eventually you lose sight of truth entirely. And that's what has happened to most of these people. They're adapting, okay, we've got a narrative, I'm not going to get ahead in life unless I accept the narrative. So they accept the narrative. It's called adaptation. Okay, it's artificial, it's not like natural selection, where nature selects you. Okay, you're being selected now by a bunch of ideologues. Bunch of people who want you to adopt a certain way of looking at things because they have all the money and power and they want to keep it forever. And that's why the Christian church has fallen so radically out of favor with most of these people, even among certain Christians, high-ranking Christians. All right, it shows up in everything they say, and I don't want to mention any particular pope. On the other hand,
you're referring to a certain Mr. Francis, present vicar of Christ. Well, he is certainly he says these things that are so puzzling and potentially heretical, and certain cardinals have raised dubia, have raised doubts and said, "Could you please answer this? It sounds like you've said something heretical." And the answer is always, "Well, you see, the Papa was misunderstood. He was misinterpreted in La Repubblica newspaper." And you say, well, if he keeps being misreported and misinterpreted, why does he keep giving the interviews to these atheist and far leftist journalists? I don't know. It's not mine to answer, I guess.
Exactly. And I mean, this is something that I think needs to be addressed by the Catholic Church itself if it wants to stop shedding Christians right and left. You see, because people are not stupid. I mean, some of them can convince themselves of things that aren't true, but basically human beings are intelligent, and you're cheating your intelligence when you subscribe to these narratives. And apparently the Pope, who communicates directly with God, he buys into these narratives, and that's a contradiction in terms.
It's funny you mention Papa Francesco, because he's come after the Latin Mass, and a lot of young...
he claims to have been a bouncer at one point in his life.
I read that somewhere. He doesn't... you look like you could be a bouncer. Papa Francesco does not look like he was a bouncer. I don't know. Do you buy it?
Maybe in a really light-duty nightclub, he might have made it, you know what I'm saying? Certainly not in most of the ones that I worked in.
He's gone after the Latin Mass, and I've noticed that young Catholics, I fell away, I was basically an atheist for about 10 years. Something that drew me, there were a lot of things that drew me back, but something that drew me back was the Latin Mass, and specifically the beauty, the smells and the bells, and the idea that the priest is facing the altar and we're all facing together and he's leading us in our worship of God. And it's not just, acoustic guitars and feel good and be a nice person to, and making it all about us.
It's a sense of the sacred.
The sense of the sacred, and a sense of the beautiful. It's why I asked that question about the role of beauty in your ideas.
That's once again a function of the telic economy, okay? Basically, it's synonymous with teleology. Something cannot be anti-teleological or deviate from the will of God and still be objectively beautiful, all right? I mean, there are people who will take, who can take a religious icon or a picture of Jesus Christ, for example, and urinate on it, like Larry David. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, or even there was the famous picture, Piss Christ, right? It was a photograph of a crucifix.
Isn't that disgusting?
Disgusting. It was funded by the federal government. I think it received funding.
They paid for that?
I believe it received some amount of funding from, I could be getting this wrong, so don't quote me, but I thought it was the National Endowment for Arts or one of those organizations.
Really?
I thought so. I could be wrong, but
that's
what I
bad. Yeah. Real bad. So, I don't know what to say in defense of these people. I don't think there is a defense for them. Okay? But if that's the kind of thing that they regard as art, then they are not in touch with beauty. And the reason they're not in touch with beauty is that they're not in touch with truth.
But I was told by all my modern teachers that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's a subjective thing and it's not objective.
It is, but unfortunately some beholders leave something to be desired in their aesthetic sense.
You're saying there is an objective standard?
Yes, absolutely. Is it consistent with teleology or is it not? Right? Obviously, you know, basically you've got this identity God who is perfection. Anything that deviates from that cannot, by definition, be good or beautiful. Okay? Now, nature experiments, I mean, it goes from one thing to another and tries certain things out, but once it becomes evident that something isn't working, then it's not consistent with teleology. Once it proves to be degenerate and causes, you know, people to become demoralized and sick of life, then we have to do away with it.
I've been told that we need to tolerate also, you know, all sorts of...
God does not tolerate evil, and neither should we.
It's a beautiful way to put it. So what do you make of the modern right? You know, the modern left is always pushing this stuff. But a lot of the modern right says, look, there was a prominent columnist who called himself conservative. I guess he sort of was for a while, but now he's pretty firmly on the left. And he said, I don't like Drag Queen Story Hour, but we need to tolerate it. It's one of the blessings of liberty. If we don't tolerate Drag Queen Story Hour...
What?
Yes.
Blessing of liberty?
Well, it's look, it's in the preamble to the Constitution. I think James Madison's rolling over in his grave at the very thought of that.
The Constitution mentions trannies, does it?
Not in my last read.
I mean, you know, I was raised in an environment where we were, you know, basically taught to be tolerant of you know, people, of their foibles, and you know, if they wanted to be a little bit deviant, well, a little bit of deviation is good. You know, you can't just be locked into one rigid way of looking at things. So I developed tolerance. But now they've become militant. They've become rabid. They're shoving it down children's throats, and it's just not good for society, okay? It violates the biological imperative of survival, okay? To become totally sexual. There's a reason that men and women exist and that they mate and create children. It's for the survival of the human race, okay? That has to remain paramount. That's got to be the preferred mode of existence. Okay, you've got to buy into that. Now, if you want to deviate a little bit in your private life, and you've got somebody, you know, who agrees to be deviant along those lines, and you want to get together in the privacy of your own abode.
You're not going to have Chris Langan knocking on their door.
I'm not going to knock on their door. It's none of my business. It's for them to work out with God Almighty. Okay, and if they can do that, more power to them. I don't know how they're going to do it, but give them a chance. Okay. But when they go out and they have gay day parades where they're cavorting, you know, nude, and they're going into children's restrooms and so forth, that's where we have to draw the line, you see.
I mentioned this modern writer who is very misguided on this particular point. Are there thinkers alive today who you think are worth reading? People always say, what's the reading list? What should I read? What should I listen to? Are there philosophers or popular writers?
There are no academic philosophers that are worthy, as far as I'm concerned, of attention.
What about
It's not because all of them are stupid or anything like that. It's because they bought into the party. They're academics.
Yeah.
Okay. They cannot violate, you know, the academic, communistic, atheistic narrative and get away with it. Okay. And if you're in that system, then obviously You're playing along with it. And you can't do that and be an honest, truthful philosopher.
Are there non-academic writers, thinkers, philosophers who you would recommend people read?
I'm sure they're out there. I haven't encountered any, not recently.
What about, okay, so that gets rid of the living people. What about those dead guys? All those old dead guys, going back to ancient Greece or anywhere in the middle?
Well, a lot of those guys had something very useful to say.
Who, if a listener right now said, I want to know who, beyond his own writing, who the smartest man in the world wants me to read, who would you recommend?
Well, I would say that you should go back and definitely read Aristotle and Plato and Socrates. Okay, start with that and then go up and then, work your way through. There are a lot of smart guys. Read Plotinus, read about Neoplatonism, right? And once you find out about Neoplatonism, then you can go back to the ancient Vedic religion, right? Because it's basically the same thing in different language. And as you know, then Neoplatonism kind of became a mainstay of medieval Christianity.
Yep.
Okay? And there's a lot to that. So those, that takes us up through, and it takes us up through some of the medieval Christian philosophers, Anselm, Aquinas, Augustine.
Yep.
And beyond that, then it starts getting dicey. You see, even when you get up to like René Descartes, for example, everything becomes dualistic. You've got these Cartesian spaces that more or less exclude the observer. There are no images of God in a Cartesian space.
Chris, have you ever, because you worked at bars, you ever hear about the horse who shows up to the bar and asks the bartender for a drink? And the bartender says, "Horse, man, you've been here every night this week. I think you're an alcoholic." And the horse says, "I don't think I am." Poof, the horse disappears. Now you see, you will understand this. This is a joke about Descartes, who says, "I think, therefore I am." But if I had told you that part first, I would have put Descartes before the horse.
I like it.
This is the only
that's
circumstance in which that joke has ever landed. I'm really pleased. I finally got a laugh out of that joke.
That's a very intelligent joke. Much more intelligent than the ones I usually hear.
Well, thank you.
Especially in a bar.
That at least I can believe. So, but I'm that digression aside, I'm glad you bring this up because people always ask me, they say, what philosophers should I read? I said, one, why are you asking me? But two, they always say, should I read John Locke? Should I read Rousseau? Should I read John Rawls? Should I read this, that, and the other? I say, maybe focus a little earlier first. And it's funny you mention, once you get up to Aquinas, after him, things start to go a little kooky.
A little south.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until now, of course, all of that is completely out of fashion. And most of these modern philosophers are, they're really, Frankfurt School type people. And that's cultural Marxism, which of course is just the social program of the Marxists.
But Chris, even though I just wrote a book last year on cultural Marxism, I have been told, reliably informed by Wikipedia, that's just a crazy conspiracy theory.
Yes, well, Wikipedia seems to think I'm a crazy conspiracy theory too. You read my biography there?
Not recently.
Everything bad that you can say, and basically, I was exiled from Wikipedia years ago. I went in and said, no, wait a minute here. No, I'm not an intelligent design creationist per se. I have a different approach to teleology and all that. And I was immediately kicked off Wikipedia. Okay, so they can say whatever they want to in my biography in Wikipedia. There's not a thing I can do about it.
Because you even suggested the idea of some sort of intelligent design.
That is correct. Well, I've been getting trolled ever since around the year 2000. Well, that goes back further than that, really. But when I went on national television and said, well, the existence of God is actually amenable to logical analysis, and you can show that there is a God, provided you have the right. That was enough. Intelligent design creationists, get out of here. So I've been, and these people are, by the way, these new atheists, they're adamant.
You're talking about Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett.
I'm talking about Richie Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, well, I don't know, Chris Hitchens, yeah. Guys of this nature, Piz Myers, PZ Myers, and people like that. I had a run-in with Myers. He hates my guts. He hated my guts 20 years ago. None of them will mention my name now though, because they know that they can be crushed. Deep down inside, they know it. They won't come anywhere near me. At some point, these people decided that they had to exclude anybody who could beat them. Okay? That's where the cancellation thing began, really. It's a new atheist thing. And now, since new atheists are a lot more fashionable than Christians are,